Hello there, people. Welcome to Friday Flight. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. All right. Let me just briefly explain, as best as I can, why you're listening to this episode on a Saturday as opposed to a Friday. Here's what happened. So, I live in the Midwest, and our weather is, well, haywire almost all of the time. And for anybody who lives in the Midwest, for anybody who lives, close to Michigan or Illinois, Indiana, wherever that is, you might have noticed that sometime like overnight, a couple of nights ago, overnight Thursday into Friday, we got blasted. We got absolutely destroyed by severe weather, hail, tornadoes, that type of stuff. Nothing happened like severely, like as far as like we didn't lose power or anything like that. But what did happen was my job. And for people who don't know, I've worked in a local television for better part of 12 years at this point. And the station that I work for called me in early. And I mean like super early. And I already work like really early in the morning, early enough that I don't get out of work until noon. Noon is when I go home from work. So I get up really early in the morning for work on a daily basis. And this was a case where I had to go in even earlier, which meant that my bedtime on Thursday night obliterated. Why was this a problem? This is a problem because Thursday was originally when I had designated to watch Andor, the final 3 episodes of Andor, because as I was saying before, I couldn't do the Wednesday thing and also record an episode, and this was a case where I couldn't even do the Thursday thing because, well, I'm not going to be able to watch all 3 episodes Thursday night and then get to bed because I've got to go to bed even earlier and, try to get to work super early the next day for all this storm coverage and having to drive through it, I might add. So Friday just ended up being a really, really, really long day. And when I got home from my long commute, I was like, nah, just no energy, man. Couldn't do it. Just did not have it in me. And then I looked at I tried, right? Like I went to go to the inbox for Flightcast and I looked at all the emails and I went, no, there's no way. This is going to be a longer episode, I suspect, of feedback. But that's what happened, basically. I had to go into work super, super early, and it just made yesterday interminably long, and I did not have the energy to just dive into all of this. And it's a loaded week, right? So, I'm not upset whatsoever that everybody sent in so many emails. No, certainly not. We have a lot to talk about. A whole lot happened this particular week that we have to discuss that you all wanted to comment on. But there was no way that I could do it without having gotten caught up on Andor. And just as one final little story here with respect to the delay yesterday, when I did watch the last 3 episodes of Andor, when I got home and found the energy to get through those 3 episodes, guess what else I had to do after I watched them? Yeah, I had to watch Rogue One. And not that I have not seen Rogue One ever. Obviously, I have. I saw it at the theater. I own it in 4K Steelbook, glorious Steelbook, which was I got the special, the Zavi version from overseas. The UK they did a really good collection of 4K Star Wars Steelbook releases. I do not have all of them, but as of currently, I have the original trilogy and I have Rogue One. So, listen, I love the movie. I thoroughly enjoy it, but it had been a minute since I'd seen it, and especially after that whole discussion we had on Threads last week about, hey, for people who, love Andor, but for whatever reason, didn't care for Rogue One, how do you feel about Rogue One now? And all these people coming at me, saying, well, the first 2 acts are still disjointed and terrible. The third act saves it, but it's still not that great of a movie, blah, 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 and all those people, right? So I gave it a rewatch and, another watch, freshly, as the ending. So I went straight from the last 3 episodes of Andor into Rogue One and went, yeah, you know what? Screw the haters. I still love this movie. It's still one of my favorite Star Wars movies. I understand there are pacing differences and I understand there are tonal differences because it's a movie and not a show. It's not a slow burn. Its pacing is identical almost to that of, the entire rest of the Star Wars franchise, especially the original trilogy and certainly the prequel trilogy as well. Things happen at the same like speed and pace, if you will, and the sequel trilogy too. But either way, that was just a great epilogue, if you will, a great conclusion to the Cassian Andor story, and it hits differently. It hits a lot differently with respect to ending, his story in that regard. But yeah, so I did that, and then once I was done, after watching, like another 2.5 hour long Andor film followed by 2 hours and 60 minutes of Rogue One. Yeah, it was late, and yeah, I was tired, and it was just like, no, not gonna happen. So that's why the delay. That's why this particular episode of Friday Flight is popping up on a Saturday. And everything that I just said about Andor is only the beginning of my discussion on Andor today, because damn near all of you emailed about it, and to the point where, like, I was getting notifications. I got a notification from one of you in your email, and I immediately had to delete the notification because it showed me a preview of the email, and it showed me a spoiler. And I was like, no, and thankfully I didn't see the spoiler, and didn't like see the exact words of it, but it was all good. I stayed unspoiled. I watched it all the way through, and just for the record, I know I talked about doing an episode of Flight Box as like the final recap of Andor. This episode of Friday Flight today on a Saturday will be considered my final thoughts on Andor. I don't see the need to do a full Flight Box episode because we're already talking about it here. We're already having our discussion here. We're already having our reactions to it here. If you guys want to respond to anything that I've said in this particular episode with respect to your reactions, me talking about your reactions to it, we can talk about that in the next Friday Flight. Hopefully also on a Friday, but maybe on a Saturday. Who knows? That's just maybe something schedule-wise that happens if there is a delay. But yeah, this will be our recap episode discussion, if you will, about Andor Season 2, like finishing that off. Just throwing that out there, and I'll try and put that in the description as well so that people are aware that, yes, this is what's going to happen, and then Flightbox will go in a different direction. And I've got an idea of what I'm going to do for Flightbox going forward, like with some television catch-up before we get to the next brand new series that's going to be airing, which as of right now, I think might be Ironheart. Ironheart, definitely. And then I also said Star Trek Strange New Worlds I would like to do Flightbox episodes for as well. But either way, I've got some other stuff that I definitely can get caught up on that I could do Flightbox episodes for. But anyway, enough with all that. I think that was it for the explanation as far as the delay. So without further ado, let's dive into what is going to be a loaded and thorough episode of Friday Flight with respect to feedback on everything that happened this past week. So let's start where we usually start, with John R., who sent about 7 emails this week, and I haven't looked at any of them. I haven't looked at any of these emails, so I'm not even 100% certain exactly how long each of them are going to be. I'm just sit back, relax, plan for a longer show. But let's start with his first email, which he titled Addressing Themes of Mental Health. All right, intriguing title. He says, I just want the opportunity to respond to something you said about Big Bang Theory characters having mental health issues and Wallyu's experience among the general consensus that Thunderbolts, the new Avengers, thematically is about dealing with mental health. He says, first, on to your point about Big Bang Theory. Yes, I understand Sheldon had difficulty articulating how something bothers him. Maybe as someone on the spectrum myself, I'm ultra-sensitive to seeing something that doesn't sit right with me. This goes back to the Friday Flight show about that Simpsons episode I spoke of too. If something is uncomfortable to me, it bothers me a lot. He says, I was diagnosed with pervasive development disorder when I was about 3 or 4, and a general acceptance that I had some form of ASD, autistic spectrum disorder. I had difficult times, he says. My parents also dealt with mental health. I grew up around privileged people. Like my dad's side of the family was rich. We were not. My uncle, who happens to also be named Rich, had his own audio speaker company in San Francisco, he says. I had friends who could get what they wanted from their family anytime. It was always a struggle. It did make me appreciate things that I did get. Like when I was 9, my brother and I got an N64 for the holidays. It was incredible, he says. I had the worst time making friends, and I often felt alone at times. My family loved me, but I didn't get the luxury of deep, long-lasting friendships until my teens. But I did eventually find bonds with people, he says. Sometimes I do feel alone. When an ex left me in 2015, I was lost. We'd been together for 3 years. Then my car broke down, plus I began dealing with physical health issues, and then the bad reviews of Batman v Superman came out, and when I went and actually liked the film, I lost a ton of sleep, and my physical and subsequently mental problems got worse. I had to be rushed to the hospital, and for the first time in my 26 years alive at the time, I began taking medication, he says. After that, I briefly moved to New York and worked for my uncle's company for 6 months, and then I moved back to California shortly after my best friend's house burned down. My goodness. My mom had also moved to New York, but she stayed, he said. After about a year and a half of living in Clear Lake, I met Laura in 2019. We dated on and off that year, and when things got serious, the pandemic happened. We still stayed in contact, and eventually we lived together for different periods, in California and in Florida. John says, one night last summer, I forgot to take my medication, and she got mad at me for acting a certain way at a restaurant, and that I couldn't join her for a fun night out with her friends despite trying to rectify the mistake. I was so hurt by what she said that I had intrusive thoughts of self-harm that I spoke externally to her about them. On top of everything else, I had gotten fired and my grandma died earlier in the year, so I was already not in a good place, he says. Laura decided to end the engagement, and then soon after the relationship entirely. It was the worst year of my life. We had stayed in contact until about 2 months ago when she severed any means of reaching out. My mom moved back to California and rented a house, and I'm staying with her for the time being. He says, I started dating Tammy earlier this year. I'm not going to lie, the loss of people I loved a year ago and are now out of my life, there's still pain there. I'm glad Wally, whose partner, stayed, he says. Don't get me wrong, Laura worked her ass off to make a life with me work. I had meltdowns here and there, and Laura did her best for 5 years with me, and I appreciate she did, but I think I brought her to her limits, and she herself had trauma she needed to work on. I think she realized she couldn't handle taking care of herself and me, and I get it. He says, what I really love about Tammy is she knows I'm not over her and she's okay with that. She knows I'm on a road of self-healing and she's willing to walk alongside me. She cares that I'm in pain, and I did cry about it, not gonna lie. I'm making sure that to take my medication every day, and maybe once Laura is finally worked through her issues, maybe someday we can all be friends. It's unlikely. It's hard to be friends with exes, but I genuinely wish her well, and I hope she finds happiness, maybe even more happier than the best times we had. Well, that is a lot of personal sharing, John. I thank you, and I appreciate the insight into your life and a lot of the struggles that you've gone through. But your email continues. You said, as for Thunderbolts, the new Avengers, I did really feel for Yelena's struggles the most. Everyone else, like Bob and John, there's definitely a kinship that I understand. I didn't mean to downplay this movie, and I do think it's an important movie, but I think it's easier to relate to people in real life than in fictional movies, and maybe that's why I'm not praising it on the same level like a lot of you are. I get the praise, he says. I really do, and it's justified. But when I saw Yelena's problems, it reminded me of the music video for Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero. Before the video, I thought it was a decent song, but the narrative in the video did have similar elements that Yelena went through, and while I'm not really that into her music, it was the first time I believed she was actually dealing with depression. He says that's also why I began enjoying the Beach Boys a lot. Brian and Dennis Wilson had severe mental health problems, which stemmed from their abusive father, Murray. Dennis, while still dealing with drugs and alcohol, drowned. Brian had a panic attack on a plane and stopped touring for years. He would slip into a deep depression after he couldn't finish Smile. The man ate junk food, did drugs and alcohol practically every day, and mostly stayed in bed for 2 years, and then Dr. Landy came along and helped him lose the weight, but exploited the shit out of him, and even getting him to be the executive for his will. This is all well documented in the film Love and Mercy, but even that film didn't scrape the bottom of the barrel. Many professionals thought Brian was going to die in his 40s. He'll be 83 on June 20th, which is when Tammy will turn 37. Well, all right then. He says, so yes, I have all the empathy in the world for anyone going through anxiety, depression, you name it. I didn't mean to get personal, I just felt I had to share my story. Wally's story gave me a fresh new perspective, and Ray, while I'm still not 100% okay with the sweater episode, I get where you're coming from. I can't say I ever felt like I'm wearing an itchy sweater when things have gone wrong, but I get nervous and sweaty. For my next email, I'll try to keep things geek-centered. I just wanted to share my experiences so that I can assure them they're not alone. Oh, and while I'm writing, he says, I'll stop with the asterisk to the streak. Maybe I'm sad you don't have a streak with DC movies, and you also saw all the Sony Marvel films in theaters too, but now that you clarify that you consider the DCU and DCEU separate franchises, I look forward to seeing how well you do with the DCU streak intact. My apologies, good sir. This is probably the soonest I write an email after an episode of Friday Flight, but I really wanted to address where I was coming from. He said at the end of this, I might send one more email before the next show. I'm not sure when that would happen, but I'll keep all of you posted. Stay tuned. Oh, he sent more than one email after that, because he did send this email like right after last week's Friday Flight came out. I will say this, John. Number one, don't feel bad with respect to sending anything about your personal feelings. I mean, the thing about like movies, TV, and other sort of media, like our own personal perspectives, mental health challenges, and whatnot are a big reason why we gravitate toward these heroes, these stories, these characters. It's why we talk about relatability. It's why a film like Thunderbolts can resonate with a lot of us. Because I hear you in terms of like relatability to human beings, but a lot of us find that challenging at times. And struggle with that. And so, and in many ways, we do, even from a young age up to now, like as adults, we can find relatability within characters in movies, right? Because if you're just sitting, by yourself or wherever watching a film, or even if you're with somebody else watching a film, you know, staying in your own thoughts, you can find something in it, without feeling judged, because nobody on that screen is going to judge you. Nobody on that screen is going to treat you differently. You're watching their story, right? And you're seeing what it is, whatever vulnerabilities they have, whatever issues they're dealing with, if you relate to them, if you feel similar to them, you can see them play out without them telling you to stop looking or, don't listen to me or anything like that, right? You're there for that, and that you can immerse yourself in those emotions. And that's how a lot of people, that's how I think all of us on some level process these stories. And that's why it's a very subjective medium, because it can affect all of us in different ways, from different perspectives and different walks of life. So no, I don't feel bad about getting a bit personal. I mean, thank you for sharing the personal details. I mean, it was very personal. You have definitely gone through some challenges in your life, as I'm sure many of us have, very unique challenges on your end. And I get it, man. When people talk about, like you had mentioned how, BVS's the reception to that movie, hell, because you enjoyed it, you didn't take the reception to it very well, and people don't realize that, right? Like that's part of the reason why I understand and I accept when people don't like that film, but when people just are overly negative and toxic about it, and turn into bullies about it, that's when I really fight back. That's when I really am like, shut your mouth, like seriously, like if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all in that regard, because you don't know who it is that you're affecting with that, right? And I'm not defending like any of the cultist behavior or anything like that, but there are people out there that just want to enjoy having a rational discussion with other fans of that film. And it's like so many others, especially on social media, just decide to piss all over it and be rude and attention whoring with respect to it. And I have absolutely no quarter for that whatsoever. Those people are the lowest forms of life in many ways, that I can think of in my regard. So that's, I think everybody's mental health on some level can be respected, and there's definitely a connection between that and the movies and the shows that we watch and the comics that we read. So it's all connected in that regard. Our emotional perspective for sure is all connected in that regard. So yeah, I hear you on that. I completely understandable. And I have my own mental health challenges and stories, with respect to, what I've gone through in life. It's weird because I'm one of those like introverted extroverts, I guess you could say, where like, I'm standoffish and don't necessarily warm to people immediately, but, you know, if I'm in a group setting and someone brings up Star Wars or Star Trek or sports or whatever, I can easily dive into that conversation. There's a lot of different topics I can talk to people about, right? I'm a ubiquitous conversation starter, and like I can definitely like get people engaged in conversation. So to look at me, like if I'm at a party or whatever, I might start off the evening quiet, but after a minute, I'll get into the conversation and I'll talk to people, and I feel like I'm just as extroverted as anybody else. But it's that first step that's always a struggle for me. Just relaying a little bit of my own personality with respect to it. But no, man, thank you for sharing. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for the clarification. I get what you're saying with respect to Thunderbolts, and also with Big Bang Theory. And I don't have the itchy sweater problem either. At least not the way that Sheldon does. There are definitely certain things that bother me, and there are a lot of aspects of his character that I do relate to, like with some of the other behaviors that he exhibited, being on the spectrum, speculatively in that show, but not everything. And I totally get it. But that's where I was coming from with respect to that. And yeah, as far as streaks are concerned, yeah, the DCU hopefully will be a new streak. And I say hopefully, not just because of my hope that in seeing all those in the theater, but also I hope the franchise succeeds. I hope that there are enough DCU movies that I can build that streak. That is the hope. That is the fingers crossed that they succeed right out the gate with Superman and continue that way, so that I will be able to build a streak, that may rival the, come close to being the MCU. And again, I should also point out that the DCEU streak really was only broken by the pandemic, because of the Suicide Squad being released on, and Wonder Woman 1984, both of those being released on HBO Max as opposed to theatrically released, during the time where I was a little bit more trepidatious in going to the theater, with respect to those films. So that was it. I've even seen, believe it or not, I think I've mentioned this before, I have seen Zack Snyder's Justice League in theaters. I have. So, like, even that wasn't what broke the streak as far as the DCEU is concerned. So, yeah, Superman will mark, hopefully, the beginning of a new DCU streak, and hopefully I can start that and keep that going. We'll see. But all right. On to your second email, John. This one is titled Some Questions and a New Premise for Flightcast, which he sent the same day that he sent the first one. Said, I guess it didn't take me long to write another email, lol. So number one, he says, so we know there are 4 types of fandom. We know the Snyder cultist, the gun cultist, and the rational fans that enjoy both, but there's also a type of fandom that I have seen on occasion, the ones who hate both. He says, I recently saw a comment that said the Snyder Superman sucked and Gunn Superman will suck too. I thought to myself, that's right. There are irrational fans that hate anything not Christopher Reeve or DC Animated Universe. I'm guessing they can go pound sand with those cultists too. Seems more like a 6-sided shit stain than a coin, doesn't it? Snyder cult that loves Marvel but hates Gunn. Right, because that's not bipolar fan behavior. Shaking my head. Anti-Snyder who love Gunn and Marvel. Snyder cult that hates Marvel. People who don't like anything DC does. The MCU is the gold standard fandom, and the fans that just think it all sucks, Marvel, DC, etc. And there are rational ways to have these opinions, he says, but it's crazy how common people act this way. There's a common saying, anyone who comments about how much they hate something that frequently, then they don't actually hate it. Well, I would say this. So first off, with respect to all these behaviors, it's really confined to social media. People in real life don't act like this. The general audience largely does not act like this. The general audience still, to this day, believes that Marvel and DC are the same universe. I mean this. Okay, I got coworkers now at the station that I'm working at now that absolutely are still in that same mindset, right? My one coworker that I talked about, my favorite coworker, my partner in crime with what I do, she's an awesome coworker and has been at that station for a number of years. And she is the one that I have said before that she doesn't remember all the Marvel movies that she's seen, but she knows that she saw Infinity War. She liked the movie and has absolutely had no impetus whatsoever to watch Endgame. That's right. I've brought her up before. Her husband is a huge fan of like Marvel, Star Wars, all that stuff, but she is as general audience normie as they come. Saw Infinity War, liked it for what it was, and absolutely does not care if she ever sees Endgame, right? Now, how crazy is that to us, right, as far as that types of behavior? But that's like the vast majority of the general audience is like her, not like us. And they're not part of any of these groups. Seriously, they really aren't. They not nearly to the strong enough point that we see on social media. So that's one thing that I would say is that this type of extremism is really only confined to social media people and our ilk in that regard, right? So those are the archetypes, just, to remind people that it's not real life. It's not the vast majority of real life that thinks or feels this way about these movies, right? So there's that. Then there's also, like you said, the types who hate both Snyder, the Snyder films, and also think that Gunn's film is going to suck. Here's what I said this also a little bit on Threads, John. I said that with respect to Gunn's movie, I do suspect that there are going to be fans, people that clutch their pearls to Superman the movie and like hang their hats on Christopher Reeve as gold standard, and I love the fact that the Williams theme is in the trailer. I think that they're going to see that movie and they're going to turn on James Gunn. I do. I believe that there are going to be fans of Christopher Reeve Superman that will turn on James Gunn because his movie will not be what they want it to be. They want a carbon copy of Superman the movie. I don't think they're getting that. I really don't. And I think now, through teasers, TV spots, and now a full trailer, I think we're seeing that this movie is not going to be Superman the movie. It just isn't, okay? Superman the movie never had a scene where Lois flat out was arguing with Clark about Superman's actions. That never happened. Okay, we never saw that. And think about the Battle of Metropolis in Superman 2. Think about all the stuff with the missiles in Superman the movie, right? And Lois and Clark never had that type of conversation whatsoever between Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve. That did not happen. And granted, it didn't really happen so much like that in Man of Steel, but there was certainly groundwork for people to have conversations like that in Man of Steel, right? We just never got any further with it, if you will, or it was portrayed a different way because the relationship between Lois and Clark in those films was different than this is in this regard, right? Despite the similarities of her knowing who he is and all that. But my point is, I feel like there are going to be a lot of the anti-Snyders that are right now finding every reason and excuse to celebrate James Gunn's film and to weaponize it against Man of Steel and BVS. And then they're going to see that movie on July 11th and they're going to be horrifically disappointed. And they're going to throw Gunn in the same category as Snyder. And they're going to say it's this and it's that or whatever. And they're going to turn on him. I do. So I think those people will go into that group, right? Like the ones who hate both, if you will, right? Because they're not looking like right now, without seeing the film, they're hanging on, they're clinging to the notion that Gunn is going to give us a carbon copy of Superman the movie. And when that does not happen and their dreams are crushed, their very weak and pathetic dreams, I might add, are crushed, then they will turn on him. They will. And they will see him as no different than Zack Snyder. It's just brighter in that regard. I do believe that will happen. I don't know how many people are going to do that. And quite honestly, it doesn't matter, especially if the general audience warms to this and the general audience enjoys the film and wants to see more of the DCU going forward. That's what's most important with respect to the success of Superman, as a film in that regard. So yeah, it's all just this ridiculous, all these, fan is short for fanatic, and a number of people are fanatics in the wrong direction with respect to this. And I really do feel, akin to what you were saying about anyone who comments about how much they hate something that frequently, then they don't actually hate it. Yeah, that's a big, the shorter way of saying that is the phrase, methinks thou dost protest too much. And yeah, I feel like a lot of those people complaining, about others, the calls coming from inside the house, and you're just closeted, psychologically speaking, in that regard, and you want to make it seem like, oh, Zack Snyder's the Antichrist, and it's like, no, not at all. You were just, you hate what it has done, and you're letting it consume your life, and it's not healthy, and you should just come to grips with that instead of trying to gaslight the rest of us, and instead of trying to trash a filmmaker for telling the story that he wanted to tell just because you didn't necessarily care for how he told it in that regard, subjectively speaking. So yeah, I hear you on that. All right, second part of your email, the second email, you said, I'm realizing that a lot of these what if 4 episodes are becoming a little challenging because I'm running out of ideas for the episodes themselves. We're only 2 episodes in, but no, I hear you. That is challenging because you got to think of different episodes of shows. But he says, no matter, I'm going to shift this premise a little. Shows that ended abruptly, he says. How I would have written a true final season plus what if certain movies had sequels. Okay, all right, I like that idea. But he says, today I'm going to do the former. What if Family Matters had a 10th and final season? He says the final episode where Steve returns to space was not intended to be the final episode. Instead of doing an episode to episode, I'm just going to give a quick rundown of what I would want to see in this hypothetical season. He says Myra tries to turn Stefan back into Steve form. Maybe this might be too dark even for Myra, but she does seem to take a lot of things too far for a borderline stalker, plus the sole intent of Stefan existing is for him to be with Laura. I think there's a lot of commentary you could do with this. Explain Judy's whereabouts and Rachel makes a return. Okay, you're going deep on that one. All right, and Judy in particular. Could they make two Harriet's joke? I would be open to that. He says Steve makes a final celebrity transformation. Who? I don't know. Maybe he cosplays as Sonic the Hedgehog as an in-joke. Carl and Eddie become partners. Myrtle makes a final appearance. Steve and Laura's wedding. Thoughts? Okay. Well, John, I have to be honest with you. You may not like this answer, but I will tell you that I did not finish Family Matters in that regard. And specifically, growing up with Family Matters sitcoms, even though I watched them, I didn't watch them like that because back in, I hate saying this because I just sound old when I say it, but back in my day, it wasn't digital and we had to rely on broadcast television and cable guides that were printed on paper and sent in the mail in order to know when things were coming on, and we had to rely on other networks for syndication to show us episodes that were completely out of order of a particular show that we enjoyed, so we didn't follow seasons that way. And I haven't revisited Family Matters since then because even though I liked that show, there were so many other sitcoms and shows that I also like that are a bit more adult that I wanted to get into, so I don't really have an opinion on this one, man. I'm sorry. I really don't. Because I didn't see how the show ended. I've watched so many episodes of that show, and I grew up with that show, but again, like I said, we weren't watching them in order. It was disjointed, man. And not only that, but it was in syndication, if I recall correctly. It went into syndication at the same time that they were airing new episodes on ABC, so I could tune into TBS or other networks and watch older episodes at the same time that newer ones were airing. And a lot of times, I liked the older episodes more because they were like more hilarious episodes that I had seen originally and like grew up with. So I would end up watching the syndicated ones more than I watched the brand new ones. So I'm sorry, I don't really have an answer with respect to any of your thoughts, because I didn't know that Steve made celebrity transformations. The whole idea of Carl and Eddie becoming partners, okay, I could see that. That would be interesting because Carl being a cop. Myrtle making a final appearance, yeah, sure. Steve and Laura getting married, yeah. These are all things that I could totally understand. The Judy thing, that the daughter that went upstairs and never came back downstairs, yeah. I don't know. That'd be crazy, but yeah. I think all of your ideas are valid. I don't have any like personal response or stakes in them because, like I said, I never finished the show like that. So sorry. Apologies for that, but I'm glad that you gave it a good deal of thought with respect to what if in this regard. But on to your third topic for this second email. He says, here's a topic I thought you might like. I remember there was an episode of Frasier where Martin was irate with his boys about their snobby behavior in public. Even your mother enjoyed a hot dog at a game once in a while, he said. That's the quote. Which made me then realize that perhaps their class status did make them seem out of touch. It made me realize, though, out of the two of them, Frasier is more like his dad than Niles is. When he's around his Cheers peers, he's certainly more grounded and individual. I don't think I've seen Niles act that abrasive. What's your perspective on this? I would agree with you, but part of that is unfair only because it not unfair in terms of us talking about it, but unfair in terms of how the character is presented. Because Frasier started on Cheers, right? We have 9 extra seasons of Frasier on Cheers that we don't have with Niles in Frasier, right? Niles, we just get those 11 seasons he was in Frasier. Mind you, that's a lot, right? And to say that his character didn't change over the course of the show, most certainly it did, but so did Frasier's character. But yeah, the blue collar stuff that you're talking about with Frasier, yeah, we absolutely saw that in those 9 years of Cheers. There's no doubt. There's absolutely no doubt. So yes, I would agree, right? But I think also part of the change is, when he went back to Seattle, and he's with his brother in his element, right? His prime element. He's not in that bar anymore, and so that's where the juxtaposition comes into play. But no, there's definitely more relatability that we see as an audience member, especially if we followed Frasier to his own show, that we see that. Yeah, no, Niles is definitely not like that. Niles is definitely, and there were other parts of Niles' character that definitely softened. I mean, obviously, come on, like he did his relationship with Daphne. I mean, that's huge right there as far as like bringing him down. And then here's another thing I would say about Niles in terms of his character evolution is his whole relationship, as his friendship rather with Roz. If you recall, John, the first 3 or 4 seasons of Frasier, Niles and Roz hated each other. Like that was a very contentious relationship because she was too blue collar for him, and he was, real quick to make jokes about, her sex life and how many people she'd been with and how slummy and slutty she was. And, and she, of course, would throw it right back at him, and, calling him how hoity-toity and, doily and all that stuff, right? So there was a lot of animosity between the two of them, but that over time, changed, and it really did turn into a friendship where there was mutual respect. There were times where he helped her out, she helped him out, right? And Frasier was kind of the peacemaker involved in that, but so was Daphne in that regard, right? And this is where the great dynamic of that group of 5, this is really where the work that Kelsey Grammer, David Hyde Pierce, Jane Leaves, Perry Gilpin, and John Mahoney, may he rest in peace, all did. This is where that chemistry really came into play because it showed such a natural progression for these characters and how they grew over the 11 seasons of that show. And so you get to a point where in that final season, I mean, Niles and Roz are definitely the lifelong friends, best of friends at this point, part of that group, part of that inner circle, which is something that Niles never would have thought to do in the first couple seasons of the show whatsoever. So there is growth from Niles, but no, he certainly is not nearly as blue collar as Frasier because, we never saw an opportunity for him to do that like we did with Frasier in 9 years, seasons 3 through 11 of Cheers in that regard. So yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I completely agree. And then the fourth point to this episode, to this particular email, he says, so I don't know if anyone knew this, but comic book artist Greg Hildebrandt passed away a few months ago. He was probably a big influence on Alex Ross, and he was able to make his art realistic at the most timeless, I would say. I grew up mesmerized by his illustrations of Pinocchio, which was very faithful to Carlo Collodi's original story, he says. Here's some of his iconic art. May he rest in peace. I think his twin was also an artist. And so I'm looking at the artwork here, and the Pinocchio artwork. The Star Wars, his take on the Star Wars poster, that's intriguing. I do like that. The poster for A New Hope, if people remember the poster where, it's the big Darth Vader head and the Death Star and the X-Wings in the back while Luke is standing on the mountaintop with a lightsaber lit and Leia, standing next to him or just, in front of him with a blaster. Like, it's his take on that. That's nice. I really like that one. And then looks like a picture of a family of gnomes, if you will. A couple of those. Oh, and this has got to be Lord of the Rings. Yes, I see Gandalf, old school Aragorn, old school Frodo, and Samwise. Yes, totally. No, this is great. I've heard the name Greg Hildebrandt, but no, I was not aware that he had passed. So yeah, may he rest in peace. Indeed. Thank you for bringing that to our attention here, John, here in this second of your gaggle of emails for this week. Let's get to your third email that you sent a few days after that last one, titled, Is it any surprise that the most famous superhero in the world should be a figure of controversy? And John says, short answer, no, it's not. Here's my thoughts on the official trailer. All right, here we go. Superman trailer thoughts. John says, what I think is really cool about the Superman trailer is I like that they established that this is a young version of the character, but it's not day one like Cavill's, more like after 6 months to a year. Also, it debunks some things we didn't know about. Someone described Cornswet as being the perfect fusion of Reeves and Cavill, and maybe even a little bit of Routh. I tend to agree, he says. I believe Gunn looked at everything in Superman's history and took the absolute best parts. From everything. From the comics, from the TV shows, from all the movies. I saw a little of Superman 1 and 2. I even kind of think the Hammer is like a better version of Nuclear Man. Holt in the Fortress is a lot like a better version of Spacey in the Fortress. The fights are right out of Man of Steel. Being a divisive political figure? BVS, of course, he says. Am I missing anything? Oh, and so far, this is the best version of Lois I've ever seen. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the trailer and dissecting it. The action scenes with the Justice Gang are fun. I think he sold this film on all the rational fans. The ones that want to be miserable in their corners saying it looks like a video game hold up? How's that an insult? There are people out there that think The Last of Us cutscenes are better than the actual show, and again, this is just a trailer. I need to see the movie before I truly give my thoughts. I'm glad you said that last part, John, because I do want to say, before we can say something like this is the best version of Lois we've ever seen, we got to see the whole Lois. Now, I grant you, I really like what Rachel Brosnahan does in this trailer. I really like the way that she is playing Lois. Is like, I had no doubts, and I still have no doubts that she is going to knock Lois Lane out of the park. I think she's going to do a fantastic job. But I'm just saying, I already like what she's doing, what I'm seeing with her in this character, and I like the relationship that she's having. She is still a reporter, right? Like, she may be involved with Clark, she may know he's Superman, but she is still a reporter, and she is still going to ask the tough questions, right? Like I said in Flight Alert the other day, he thought she was going to softball that interview, and she went full Lois Lane journalist in him, and he didn't know how to handle it. He didn't know how to handle it at all, and that's why that first part of that trailer, that's why I love it so much. That is my favorite part of the trailer. I love that dynamic. I love those questions. I love the tension, and I love the rising escalation and the argument between the two of them. I love that. The humanization of it, right? Like, I totally love that, and yeah, I am quite confident that I agree with you. I think this is a film, just looking at this trailer, I do think this is a film that most certainly will be one that the general audience could potentially latch on to. I really do. And it just depends on how, the story goes and how the characterizations go. But, again, the Gunn's track record with what he did with the Guardians films and that speaks to, the potential for what this film could do for the general audience in that regard. I do think it's something that they could latch on to. I think if the most, as of right now, if this trailer goes the way that, I'm thinking, I think the most trouble we will get will be from the fans and from the people who want to be miserable. I think even those who still prefer Man of Steel after the film, I think they could still look at this film and go, "Oh, well, no, it wasn't bad." I don't think we're gonna get people, from the rational side of the fandom, John. I don't think we're gonna get rational Snyder fans that watch Superman and go, "Oh, that was awful." I think at worst they're gonna go, "Oh, that was all right." Like they'll still prefer, their Superman the way that Henry Cavill and Zack Snyder did it in Man of Steel. But they will not shit on this movie, right? They won't torch it and go, "Oh, this is terrible, and it's a disgrace to Superman, and Siegel and Schuster should have won that lawsuit." No, I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think rational fans are going to do that at all. I really don't. And so then it just comes down to the general audience. And if there's enough in there for the general audience to relate to with respect to this film, being Superman and all. So yeah, I'm with you. My cautious optimism has definitely gone up, and I agree in terms of seeing different elements from all the other incarnations, other interpretations of Superman, and so far seeing a great blend of that just in this trailer, and just hope that the film, consistently does that throughout its entire runtime, when we do finally see it here in July. So yeah, I'm with you on that. This next email you sent a couple of days ago, this is a quick one. He says, "I'm getting this framed," and what it is, and I saw this on Threads. Jeff Morin Art made a comment on Threads. He said, "People are so weird about Superman online," and James Gunn responded and said, "Tell me about it." Yes, that should be framed. Especially, you know what? Wait until after, hopefully Superman succeeds and does well. Once that happens, then yes, definitely frame that, John. People are so weird about Superman online. Tell me about it. That's one of my favorite James Gunn responses to anybody, because yeah, they're very weird. Very weird about Superman online for just no, that unacceptable reasons in many ways, even with respect to all the other stuff that I talked about. But here's another one that you sent. This is from Josh.Hirsch_11. He commented, "I feel like it's the loud minority of people, though. Like most people either do not care nearly as much or are normal about it." And James Gunn responded, quote, "Very, very much the minority." Yes. Yes, absolutely. 1000%. That is absolutely the case. Very, very much the minority. And that's what I'm trying to impart to everybody. When we see this bullshit online, guys, when we see the ridiculousness on Threads or Twitter or Facebook or Blue Sky or Instagram or wherever the hell it is, when we see these stupid ass memes, when we see that, the same thing happens like in my brain, right? When I see like an anti-Snyder piece of trash like getting 1,000 likes or 2,000 likes or whatever, we have to remind ourselves that we live, if you're in the United States, we live in a country with over 347 million people, right? We live on a planet of 8.5 billion people, a couple of thousand dimwits, most of whom aren't real people, because social media is littered with bots and rage enthusiasts and just trying to stoke the fire and get attention for clickbait reasons, right? Like it's such an infinitesimally small portion of the picture, right? It looks big, it looks huge to us, but it's not at all, not in terms of planet Earth, right? Not even in terms of the United States of America. It's nothing. It's not even a percentage point, right? So we just have to remind ourselves of that when we see this bullshit getting, liked and, shared and, people commenting or whatnot. It's like, remember how few people actually give that much of a shit about this, to this type of delusional level, right? As far as discourse in that regard. The general audience, they're just now getting wise to the idea, oh, there's a Superman trailer. New Superman movie coming out, right? Like that push is starting for them, right? And they're not going to decide whether or not they're going to see it based on what we say or based on what any of these other dipshits say, right? They're going to go and check it out for themselves and largely make decisions by themselves in that regard. So James Gunn is absolutely right. Very, very much the minority that are weird about Superman online. Because yes, most people either do not care nearly as much or like us are normal about it, right? Anybody listening to this show, anybody, myself, we're normal about it, right? As much as we may have enjoyed, we grew up with Christopher Reeve. We enjoy those movies, whether it's just the first two or, whether you like Returns or not, that type of deal, right? We like those, grew up with them. Maybe we love Man of Steel because we love what Henry Cavill and Zack Snyder did with that role. We love BVS. We love Zack Snyder's Justice League, right? And as much as we would have wanted to see that continue, we now realize rationally and realistically that is completely out the window. And now we're looking forward with at the very least, a cautious optimism, if not an actual excitement, to what James Gunn could potentially bring to the table with the DCU version of the character, right? We're looking forward to July 11th, at the very least, to satisfy our curiosity, right? We're the rational ones, we are the regular ones, we are the people that are normal about this in that regard. So yeah, we're the majority. These other fools are very, very much the minority. From James Gunn's words himself on that, 1000% agree, definitely. All right, so on to is this your last email? Yes, this is. Here we go. Your last email for this week. This is another quick one. He says, you're like the Frasier Crane of nerd culture, and he just sent me a gift that says, I'm listening, which, of course, was Frasier's tag for his radio show on KACL 780 AM in Seattle. I'm listening. Yes, you know what? I'll take that. I'll absolutely take that. I don't mind being the Frasier Crane of nerd culture whatsoever, because I do have some elitist tendencies, if you will, like Frasier, but like you said earlier, John, I can be blue collar, because I was certainly raised blue collar in that regard. So, I definitely see where people like Martin are coming from. I like sports, right? Sports ball, if you will, like some people in nerd culture call it, that don't really follow into football, baseball, and that other stuff. But yeah, thank you. I take that as a compliment, good sir, because Frasier Crane, of course, one of my favorite characters and my favorite sitcom of all time, for sure. So I think that's it for your nearly Dorsey-sized collection of responses this particular week, John. Thank you as always for the feedback, and again, thank you for sharing some of your personal stuff going early that you talked about earlier. Just in terms of the whole mental health conversation that we do have as fans, that we should be able to healthily have as fans, right? And thank you for referencing what Wally you shared with us not too long ago. And just understanding where a lot of us are coming from with Thunderbolts and Big Bang Theory and all that stuff. So thank you as always, good sir, for the feedback. Looking forward to more of it as always. All right, I want to read an email from a long-time listener that has rejoined the fray here briefly, Rachel Bernatowitz, who we haven't heard from in a bit. She sent an email simply titled Geraldine Viswanathan, which, for people who don't know, that is the name of the actress that plays Mel, Valentina's assistant in Thunderbolts. And so Rachel says, hey Ray, sorry for not sending an email in the past few months. Still not caught up on everything I've wanted to get caught up on. But I did watch Thunderbolts this past week for my birthday and listened to your review of it. She says, I really enjoyed the movie as a whole. I love Yelena and thought Florence Pugh did a great job carrying the movie, and she and the rest of the cast worked really well together. He says, I haven't listened to the most recent feedback circle, so I don't know if this has been mentioned yet. But I wanted to shout out the project that I know Geraldine Viswanathan from, which is the series Miracle Workers. It's a comedic anthology series that starred a core trio of Viswanathan in addition to Daniel Radcliffe and Steve Buscemi, with each of those actors playing 4 different characters over the course of the show. I thought she was really good in it and was excited to see she joined the MCU. I don't know if she will get a larger role, but I liked her in the movie anyways. Also, unrelated to movies, but I'm looking forward to Monday, September 22nd this year for certain sports bar reasons. Take care, Rachel. All right. So, Rachel, first of all, welcome back. Always welcome here in the feedback circle, whatever length of email you choose to send. Before I talk about Geraldine Viswanathan, I will tell you that I personally am not looking forward to Monday, September 22nd as much as you are, because you're probably going to win that game. For people who don't know what Rachel is referring to, Rachel is a Baltimore Ravens fan. I, of course, am a Detroit Lions fan. And Monday, September 22nd is a Monday night football game between the Detroit Lions and the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore, Maryland. And we're not going to win that game. We're not. Listen, I'm going to go out on record here calling my shot, because we've been talking about this since the schedule came out, Rachel, in the last couple of days. I have doubts. And I wish I didn't, but I have doubts about the Detroit Lions this year. Not that they're not going to be a good team. They're going to be a good team. But my issue is they have not solved their pass rush. And they're relying so much on the idea that Aiden Hutchinson is going to return. I'm talking football here for a minute, guys. Pardon me. they're selling so much on this idea that Aiden Hutchinson returning from a broken leg is going to be all we need to be able to rush the quarterback. And the problem is we're horrible against mobile quarterbacks. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. We do not do well. Even Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels tore us up last year, and we've done nothing. And not only that, but one of our best inside defensive linemen, defensive tackle, Lee McNeil, he's probably not going to be back until like Thanksgiving at the earliest in that regard, right? So we're talking about the first couple of months of the season. We're not going to have one of our best run stuffers, one of our best in the interior of the defensive line, and we still only have one pass rusher that we can rely on because our other one, Marcus Davenport, that we re-signed, can't stay healthy, can't stay on the field long enough to even remotely be like serviceable, let alone productive. And for whatever reason, we didn't re-sign Zadarius Smith, even though he really wants to be in Detroit. He was fine in mop-up duty for last year when Hutch got like hurt, but we can't at least put him on the other edge with Hutch. Like, even then, I would feel better about our pass rush then, but we didn't do any of that. We didn't draft a defensive end. We drafted a defensive tackle from Ohio State, which I'm fine with. That's okay. That's great. But we don't have edge rushers, Rachel, which means Lamar Jackson is going to run roughshod over us. That's going to happen. I know you're going to be happy. You're going to have a great night. You're going to have an awesome night, Rachel. You're be excited. Lamar's going to, get all of his stats, and he's going to be great. And it's going to be a good night for Baltimore Ravens fans. I don't have confidence that it's going to be a good night for Lions fans. I don't. I just don't. And listen, personally, I hope I'm wrong, but that's just how I see it. I think that you have every right and reason to look forward to Monday, September 22nd. I will not. I will be very cautious. I can't even say cautiously optimistic. I'm just cautious going into that game because I don't feel like we are in a good position to handle mobile quarterbacks because we have not been in the past, and there's only so much that Aiden Hutchinson can do by himself in that regard. So no, I am not confident in that regard. So glad you're looking forward to it. I cannot share that, and hopefully it's a good game, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But either way, getting back to your point about Geraldine Viswanathan, I mentioned in the Thunderbolts review that I have seen none of her work, and I feel bad because she's got quite a few credits already. Emo the Musical, Blockers, The Package. Hala is the movie that I saw. Like I haven't seen the film, but I've seen the marketing. I didn't know that was her, but that's when I'm curious about seeing that. Screened at the dramatic competition at Sundance in 2019, limited theatrical release November of 2019, digital streaming Apple TV Plus release, generally positive reviews. I'm curious about seeing that particular film, to be honest with you. But there's some other things of hers that I am curious. Bad Education, Broken Hearts Gallery, which is what I think you're referencing here. Talked about here, the Beanie Bubble, 7 Days, Rumble, You're Cordially Invited. As far as her character Mel, the theory is that Mel is short for Melissa Gold, who is otherwise known in Marvel Comics as Songbird, first appeared in Marvel 2-in-1 number 54 in August of 1979. Apparently, she first appeared with the name Screaming Mimi in that book. She's originally a supervillain, but is considered a superhero, possessing supersonic sound abilities that can cause a variety of effects. Made numerous appearances as a supervillain before taking on a new role as a superhero in the Thunderbolts series. It says after some time away from the team, she returned as a regular character in Thunderbolts, beginning with issue 144, and appeared as a supporting character when the title transitioned into Dark Avengers, beginning with issue 175. And in June of 2015, she was announced as a team member in the relaunched New Avengers, part of the all-new, all-different Marvel branding. This is why fans are speculating that's who she could be. And it makes sense. I mean, I guess Geraldine has gone on record as saying that her character is not a superpowered, anti-hero or vigilante. But here's the thing. Just because she's not superpowered in Thunderbolts doesn't mean that the MCU could not decide to make her that going forward. I don't know what the ultimate plans for her character are, but I will say that the door is open. The door most certainly is open for her to remain in the MCU as this particular character, or even as Mel, maybe just continuing to be Valentina's assistant, right? Because have we really seen the last of Valentina? I don't think so. Was she? Did Julia Louis-Dreyfus have a chair for the Doomsday casting? I don't think she did. But either way, the door is open, Rachel. The door is absolutely open for that, and We'll see. Right now, it's just fan speculation with respect to her possibly playing that character, but we will see. We'll have to wait and see in that regard. I have no issues with it. I liked her character, yeah, and I'm intrigued to see Geraldine's other work. To be honest with you, but probably Hala for sure is one that I would like to look at among other things. But yeah, very intriguing. The possibility that she could remain in the MCU as a superpowered being going forward. That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. But thank you for bringing that to our attention here, Rachel. Appreciate that. Thank you as always for your feedback. Looking forward to more whenever you get the chance. No rush, no worries, no pressure, anything like that whatsoever. All right, next up, Amr Zadan. His email is titled Rebellions Are Built on Hope, Up, Up, and Away, Armored Adventures, and TNG is woke now? All right, a couple different topics in this one. Amr says, Hey Ray, I hope you're doing well and that the wonderful listeners of the show are too. I'm doing fine myself and starting to settle into the approaching summer heat. Here in Egypt, he says, the weather is transitioning into the usual summer temperatures with highs reaching around 40 degrees Celsius, which is 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Thank you for the conversion there, Amr. I appreciate that. I've been used to these temperatures all my life, but once the humidity kicks in, that's when things start to get rough and pretty unbearable. Humid heat is a beast compared to dry heat. Oh, we know all about that. Yes, indeed. Way too much of that here in the United States as well. He says, I've got a lot to talk about in this email. I want to share my thoughts on the recently released trailers for Superman and Ironheart, as well as my ongoing thoughts on Star Trek and Andor, which, as of writing this, has just wrapped up with its final 3 episodes. I'll start with the trailers, then move into Andor, and finally Star Trek. Also, regarding the subject line of this email, you'll know exactly what I mean once you get to the TNG section. I'm sure you already have a good idea of what I'm referring to. I'm positive that I do, Amr, but let's press on, shall we? He says, first, let's talk about the trailers released so far this week. I'm going to start with Superman. Honestly, there's not much more I can say beyond what you and others have already shared. This trailer has seriously raised my excitement to an 11. I'm so happy Superman is back. Without a doubt, the best part of the trailer is the opening minutes with Lois and Clark. David Cornswet really shines in that opening, and Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane does as well. From the glimpses of the movie's action, I can already tell it's going to be a thrilling ride. The camera movements feel so kinetic and dynamic. There's a moment where a civilian helps Superman up. It was genuinely heartwarming, he says. I can't wait to see that scene in full context. It reminded me of the train scene from Spider-Man 2. Honestly, anything that calls that movie to mind is a win in my book. Yes, I would agree with that. That's a good callback. I like that connection there because the train scene from Spider-Man 2, that's one of the best Spider-Man scenes in history, in my opinion, subjectively speaking, in that regard. That's a great connection. I'm with you on that one. He says James Gunn is definitely shaping a very grounded, down-to-earth version of the character. The only downside to this trailer, it sadly ends. 3 minutes is plenty for a trailer. I don't want them to reveal too much, but come on, inject this movie into my veins already. July 11th can't come soon enough. All right. I like that enthusiasm, Amber. That's great. He says, one small concern I have so far is the theme music. I like John Williams' iconic score as much as the next person, but I hope they don't just reuse it and call it a day. David Cornswet deserves his own theme. If Henry Cavill got one, there's no reason David shouldn't. A lot of people argue that Williams' theme is no different from the Star Wars theme, he says. For example, hearing that immediately brings Star Wars to mind. But here's the thing, Star Wars has stayed within the same continuity, so it makes sense to reuse themes. David Cornswet's Superman, however, is a completely new continuity and interpretation, so I don't see why they would reuse the 78 theme, even if that's the case. Maybe they're using it just for the trailer, since hardcore fans will instantly recognize it. Maybe even more than the general audience. I don't know. Either way, if that does happen, I'll gladly accept it and move on. I'm not going to let something like that influence my judgment of the film. Amr, I 1000% agree with everything you said with respect to the theme. I'm right there with you, where, Cornswet does deserve his own theme as much as I love Williams, and I've likened it to you wouldn't use, Nelson Riddle's theme for, Neil Hefti's theme, rather, for Batman 66. You wouldn't use that for Christian Bale. You wouldn't even use it for Michael Keaton. You wouldn't use Michael Keaton's theme for Christian Bale in The Dark Knight, would you? You wouldn't use it for, Robert Pattinson in the Batman, right? Batman has had multiple themes. How come Superman can't have multiple themes? Regardless of how timeless and how iconic the Williams theme is, that's great for that one interpretation of the character. Other interpretations should be allowed to have their own themes. And But again, it's not a deal breaker for me. If that's what John Murphy and James Gunn have decided to do, I will just look at it as something that I don't necessarily, not a direction that I would have wanted them to take, but it will not, ruin the film for me in that regard. I really at that point will be like, okay, how well does it work? How well do they adapt it compared to what we see on screen? Does it fit the action and the emotions that we're seeing on screen? If it does, okay, even though I still want Corn Sweat to have his own theme, I will at least understand it from that point. It won't be a deal breaker. So I'm with you on that one completely, Amber, no doubt. He says the other trailer released on the same day as the Superman trailer, no less, was for Ironheart. I liked it, he said. I don't know much about the character. She's new to me. I'm unfamiliar with her history or origins. All I know is that she was Tony Stark's protege in the comics, and of course, what we've already seen of her through her introduction in Wakanda Forever. Now, in terms of MCU continuity, she has no connection to Tony, so I'm interested to see how the MCU adapts her character and lore to fit within its world. Word so far is that this will be a 6-episode season, making it the second shortest MCU show after Echo. Also, Ryan Coogler serving as an executive producer is more than enough reason for me to watch it, he says. I haven't seen Sinners yet, but this isn't the first time Coogler's involvement in a project has gotten me intrigued. Ever since I found out he was directing Black Panther, I knew I had to watch it. Mainly because I loved Creed so much. I really love that movie, it's one of my favorites. While he may not have a major creative role in Ironheart, his decision to come on board as an executive producer and be involved at all really says something. Yeah, that's why right before Thunderbolts came out, and you had some people that were trying to pit Sinners against Thunderbolts, and not that they were saying Thunderbolts was going to be better, but like there were some people saying that, can we just boycott Thunderbolts for another week so that Sinners can stay up? And it's like that's so effing stupid. That's absolutely ridiculous. And why is that ridiculous? It's ridiculous because one, you can see both, right? And I know you said you haven't seen Sinners yet, Amber. I would absolutely 1000% recommend that you see it before it leaves theaters. Find some time to see it. It is worth your while, absolutely. But Ryan Coogler is still a Marvel employee. Lest we forget, he has earned them nearly $2 billion with 2 Black Panther films, right? So why would we even think of sandbagging like any Marvel project since he is involved in that franchise? Those are his employers, right? In that regard, and Ironheart no different. And hopefully the popularity of Sinners does translate a little bit to Ironheart, even though it's not his show, right? It is Chenika Hadra's show, and we do want to see what her work is like as showrunner. But yes, him being involved absolutely, hopefully, will be a strong selling point. I don't have a whole lot of introduction to Riri Williams either, and I've read, I know just as much as you know that she was Stark's protege in the comics, and just what we were introduced to her with in Wakanda Forever. That's it. So it's new territory for me, but I did like that trailer as well, and I am looking forward to that show, and I think we most certainly will give it its flowers here on Flightbox when the time comes next month. No doubt about it. He says, now on to Andor. Oh boy, what an incredible show, he says. All right, got a lot of Andor. Andor thoughts for people who are not caught up on Andor. Andor spoiler warning. Andor spoiler warning. Here we go. Final time, Andor spoiler warning. All right, let's dive into it. Amr says, I've enjoyed it from beginning to end. So far, this is peak Star Wars for me. To be fair, I haven't seen Clone Wars or Rebels yet. I've heard amazing things about both, but until I get around to watching them, Andor sits at the top of my Star Wars list. In last week's email, I talked about episodes 1 through 6. At the time I wrote it, I had already watched episodes 7 and 9, but I hadn't had a chance to send an update. So in this message, I'll be covering those episodes along with the final 3. Okay, good, because I was otherwise going to have to warn you about everybody else's responses, because the rest of us are all completely caught up. But either way, you were completely caught up as well. So here we go. He says episodes 7 through 9 are my absolute favorites. I would agree. I would 1000% agree with that. He says, for me, they're the best of the season. That's not to say the last 3 weren't good, but the Gorman-centric episodes and the one focused on Mon Mothma were absolutely incredible. They were beautifully written, emotionally heavy, and packed with tension. The Gorman Massacre episode in particular was devastating, he says. The tension was palpable throughout, with every character from Cassian to Cyril to Dedra constantly on edge. I was genuinely surprised how I felt about Cyril's end in episode 8. It actually made me kind of sad. He showed a glimmer of change, a brief moment of self-reflection after Cassian hit him with that gut-wrenching line, "Who are you?" It really shook him. You could see it made him question everything, especially following his earlier confrontation with Dedra. Then just moments later, he was shot in the head. Brutal. In a way, Amr says he got what he deserved. He was complicit in advancing the Empire's agenda, whether he fully understood it or not. But it was still a sad end, made even more tragic by that one small moment of humanity right before he died. Also, huge shout out to Kyle Soller as Cyril and to Diego Luna. That final shot where the camera lingers on Cassian's face as he starts tearing up and emotionally breaks down after witnessing the genocide was incredibly powerful. After the very heavy Gorman episode, Amr says we move into episode 9 titled Welcome to the Rebellion, which focuses on Mon Mothma. This episode absolutely lives up to its title as we see Mon truly begin to rebel. The way she does it is through an incredible speech where she boldly speaks out against the Empire and even goes as far as to courageously condemn the Emperor himself. God, what a speech, she says. The sequence following the speech with Cassian escorting Mon out of the Imperial Senate building was really good too. Mon singling out the Empire in the middle of the Imperial Senate takes some serious balls, pardon my language. That moment alone just shows how far she's willing to go, and it really solidifies her role in the rebellion. Yeah, all of that. I mean, seven through 9, that arc. I agree with Amber here, guys. I think that is the strongest arc out of the 4, and I feel like most would agree with us on that one. I mean, just the storytelling. I mean, the Gorman massacre and certainly Mon's speech. I mean, those are the moments, right? That third year, that third arc, BBY2. That's what hits. I mean, that's what really slaps. That's where this show was 1000% at its strongest storytelling and thematically. I could not agree more with that. He says now the final 3 episodes, episodes 10 to 12. He says these episodes serve as a powerful conclusion to the series, with episode 12 providing a perfect segue and setup for the Star Wars film it connects to, Rogue One. I made the fantastic decision to watch Rogue One immediately after finishing the final episode, and it was awesome, he says. It genuinely felt like I was watching Andor Season 2, Episode 13. The show elevated the movie for me and made the ending hit even harder. It felt even more tragic and emotional with all the added context. It works both ways, too. I guess that's the benefit of hiring the same writers to create a show based on the character they originally introduced and a movie they helped shape, he says. Watching Rogue One after Andor, the transition between the two is seamless. The story, the characters, the tone, everything lines up. Every character behaves exactly as they should. In episode 12's ending, we last see Cassian leaving on a mission to visit one of his contacts on the Rings of Kafrene. And in the movie, where do we see Cassian first? That's right, you guessed it, the Rings of Kafrene. It honestly felt surreal watching the film with all the depth and context the show provided. Aside from the final episode, episode 10 is also worth highlighting. This episode focuses on Clea as she faces the difficult task of attempting to kill Luthen after he's captured by Dedra Meero. Luthen, unwilling to risk interrogation or worse, torture at the hands of the Empire, tries to take his own life to protect the rebellion's secrets. However, after his attempt, Dedra calls for medics and he survives, unconscious but still alive. The episode then follows Clea as she tries to break into the hospital where Luthen is being held, navigating through ISB guards and stormtroopers in a tense and suspenseful sequence. Amidst all of this, we're shown flashbacks to Clea's origin, how she met Luthen, and what he means to her. It becomes clear that he's more than just a mentor. He's a father figure to her, or just her father, period. All in all, he says, I thoroughly enjoyed this show. Now I have to come to terms of no more episodes of Andor to look forward to. That is until the next Star Wars show comes around, which I have yet to know what it will be. I believe it's the second season of Ahsoka. Feel free to correct me. I think you're right. I think it's either that. I think as far as shows, that's the next one. As far as live action shows, that's the next one. And then The Mandalorian and Grogu as far as films, of course. But here, let's talk a little bit about those last 3 episodes of Andor and certainly Rogue One. Because I will say this. I mentioned earlier in the intro, Amr, about how I did the same thing you did, right? When the credits for episode 12 of Andor started rolling and it gave me the suggestion to go on to Rogue One, I said, don't mind if I do, and went straight through to Rogue One. And I still love that movie. That movie is still fantastic. And I agree with you that it largely does line up with Andor. I will say, though, that there is one difference, and that is pacing. You know, the pacing for Rogue One is different than the pacing for Andor. But you know what? It's supposed to be. Because Rogue One is a theatrically released film that follows classic Star Wars pacing. Okay, guys, seriously, everybody, like, go back and watch the original trilogy, especially go watch prequels, even watch sequel trilogy, and tell me that the pacing of those films is any different in Rogue One. It is not. Most certainly is not. And, you know, the score that Michael Giacchino came up with for that film absolutely is the punctuating moments and the themes that we were so used to hearing on the big screen with Star Wars. It's absolutely there in that film. It's just it's an ensemble piece, right? Cassian is not the focus, right? The focus is spread all around, right? Like Jyn Erso is really supposed to be, Felicity Jones' character is really supposed to be the focus, but and Cassian is supposed to support that. But we've got all these other supporting characters. We've got Baze, we've got Chirrut, we have Bodhi, the pilot that defected. We've got K2SO, right? We've got everybody else involved. But no, I think character wise and structurally speaking, yeah, it does connect really well, honestly, as far as that goes. But the pacing is different. And again, that's the difference between a 2 hour and 60-minute long film and a 2 season television series, right? It's more of a slow burn. Andor is absolutely more of a slow burn, even though it's still a faster burn than Game of Thrones. It's still a slower burn compared to a theatrical Star Wars film. And that's what I'm going to say. A theatrical Star Wars film, not just Rogue One, because Rogue One's structure and pacing, no different than the rest of the Star Wars franchise cinematically in that regard. So that's where the people that still want to act like Rogue One is just whatever. But and all the complaints that I saw about the first 2 acts are disjointed and messy. I disagree, 1,000% disagree. The first 2 acts of Rogue One, again, Rogue One is an ensemble film. Okay, the point of the movie is what leads to the mission to steal the Death Star plans. Right? It's the opening crawl, the first paragraph of the opening crawl of A New Hope. The first 2 paragraphs. That's what Rogue One is. And Andor is the story about the character that plays a part in that mission. And I will tell you what, after watching the 2 seasons of Andor, the Andor moments in Rogue One hit harder. They do. They hit harder. When he talks about all the horrible things that he's done in the name of the rebellion, when he talks about the life that he's lived, when you see Melshi, right? Because Melshi's in the damn show. Right, like the connective tissue that they made, like the connections that they made. I mean, they literally made this show line right up with Rogue One, chronologically speaking, and they did a fantastic job with that. But it hits harder. It absolutely hits harder than it did when we originally watched Rogue One. There's no question about it. We have more of an emotional connection with Andor. We've seen all of the shit that he's done, everything that he's gone, everything that he's done for the rebellion. So when he argues with Jyn, when he has those philosophical, insightful conversations with Jyn, we know where that comes from. We have background. We know why he acts the way that he does. We know why he was prepared to kill Galen but didn't. We know why he killed his buddy Tivik, right? We've seen him do that. We saw him do it in the show, right? We just have so much more added context to that character, and it absolutely changes how we see him in Rogue One, to the point where him dying on Scarif is worse. It's worse now. Why? Because his woman and his child will never see him again. It's over. They're gone. That message that she left him about how when it was all over and they'd won, that they could find each other again, it's not going to happen. Bix is safe. Their child is safe. He's gone. He gave his life along with the rest so that the rebellion could win. So on some level, she may understand that, but on another level, it's over. They will never find each other again because he's gone. He made the noble sacrifice, and you don't have a heart if that doesn't hit you on some level. You just don't. And that Rogue One, at least in that regard, more than anything, and Rogue One was already emotional for me for all the nostalgia that people complain about. Not everybody, but certain fans complain about all the nostalgia, and I can't believe this was thrown in there, that was thrown in there, whatever bullshit. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It definitely hit home. It definitely struck some emotional chords with me as far as what this group of people decided to do in order to help the rebellion take down the Empire super weapon, right? And we knew this. We knew all of the subterfuge and all the secret shit in Andor. We all knew what it was, right? And the first time we hear the word, what is it? When Krennic is making Dedra say the word, right? And it's not a word, you asshole. It's 2 words, but she just says Death Star, and it's like, there it is. That's what it is. It's just, oh, it's so good. It's so well done, and it's so emotionally complex and compelling and fantastic. I mean, so many high marks to everybody involved. And we're going to talk about this for a lot for everybody else's reactions for the rest of this episode. But man, just so good. Andor is fantastic. What a great companion. I understand if anybody out there, if any fan says that their favorite Star Wars trilogy is Andor Season 1, Andor Season 2, and Rogue One, I got it. I got you. I hear you on that. It's just like the people who think Clone Wars and Rebels are the best of Star Wars, period. And I know there are fans out there that feel that way, that animated Star Wars is the best, right? Maybe they don't quite feel the same way as people do about DC animated being so much better than live action, at least for now. But it's up there, and I totally get it. I totally understand that. It's what a great piece of storytelling. Just absolutely phenomenal job. Diego Luna, Tony Gilroy, everybody involved, outstanding. And I am glad I made that same decision that you made, Amr, to watch Rogue One over again right after finishing Andor. It was great. It was fantastic. The Clay, and I do want to bring up the Clay episode really quick too, that because that was also really good. And that actress, I mean, I love this actress's story. If I could find her name really quick, from Andor, her name is Elizabeth DeLau, and she plays Clea Markey in the show. And I mean, those two episodes, that was her time to shine, especially that second episode, the episode Who Else Knows. That was absolutely her time to shine, and she was front and center. I do agree, like Alex was suggesting last week, that if they hadn't cast her in this badass character already, she would have been a great stand-in for Leia. But I just love the fact that she lived. I just love the fact that she survived and that she absolutely, continued on through this. I mean, she was such a warrior. She played such a great role. And I love the fact that this is her first, I believe this, if I'm not mistaken, this is her first live action, acting, her first acting job, off the stage. I mean, she's been on the stage and, has done other things that, hasn't, this is her breakout. This is her introduction to all of us as an audience as far as her on-screen career, and she deserves so much more after this. She really does, right? She said, I graduated drama school, and then I got this job. I was learning a lot as I went along, Showrunner Tony Gilroy gave her more screen time once he saw how good she was. This is from the Reddit with respect to this. She was phenomenal. She was absolutely phenomenal throughout this entire show, and I hope this is the beginning of a long and fruitful career for her, because she was great. I loved her character and was so glad that her character lived, because I was so convinced that Clay was going to die by the time this episode was over, and I was glad to be wrong about that. But yeah, so good. Andor, absolutely fantastic. Pinnacle of a fantastic franchise like Star Wars. And with that, we'll now move on to the section of Amr's email that focuses on the better, subjectively speaking, of the Star franchises, and that, of course, is Star Trek. As he puts it, at last, the section you've probably been waiting for, Ray. I'm going to talk about TNG. So far, I've watched episodes 15 through 20, and there's definitely a lot to share about what I've seen, so bear with me. Yes, Season 5 of TNG, Star Trek The Next Generation, to be precise. So here we go, warning for Alex, Season 5 TNG spoilers ahead. Okay. He says, Episode 15, Power Play. Oh, all right. Well, I thought this was a fun episode, he says. It gives Marina Sirtis, Colm Meaney, and Brent Spiner a chance to really flex their acting muscles by playing very different characters than their usual roles. You can tell they were having a good time diving into these darker, more aggressive personas. Spiner's cold menace as a possessed Data is especially eerie. He becomes this emotionless enforcer with just enough subtlety to make it chilling. Marina Sirtis gets to be commanding and cruel, which is such a striking departure from Troy's usual calm empathy. Colm Meaney as a villain is unsettling in the best way. Watching the usually warm, dependable O'Brien become calculating and threatening gives the episode a sharp edge. Time out real quick. You should see Colm Meaney in other non-Star Trek things. I've seen him be cold and villainous and threatening in other things. And you know what? Probably one of my favorite threatening role of his, a Matthew Vaughn directed film called Layer Cake starring Daniel Craig and Tom Hardy and a number of others. It's a who's who of British actors in this film. Michael Gambon, the late great Michael Gambon, is also in it. Yeah, Colm Meaney is fantastic in that particular film. So just throwing that out there as an aside with respect to him playing darker, threatening characters. Yes, very unsettling for sure. He says these performances are what elevate what could have been a standard possession plot into something memorable. It's a character showcase disguised as a thriller. He says, I also liked how Picard handles the nature of the threat. He's faced with a situation that might not have a purely scientific explanation, and rather than reject that outright, he actually pauses to consider the supernatural. Worf immediately jumping to the conclusion of spiritual possession fits perfectly with his Klingon worldview, and Picard doesn't dismiss him. It's refreshing to see that openness to possibility. It adds depth to both characters and makes the situation feel more genuinely uncertain and dangerous. This episode walks that fine line between science fiction and mysticism without tipping too far into either, which makes the mystery even more engaging. Yeah, Power Play, it is a stronger episode for sure of the entire show. It's not necessarily one of my favorites because of how different it is, right? Because the whole hostage situation in 10 Forward, that type of, not dramatic irony, but just that type of setting is not necessarily one of my favorite settings. I'm one of those. It's like I was glad for the resolution of that episode more than I was the actual episode, if you will. But I'm not gonna put that on the episode. The episode absolutely does its job. It's just not personally one of my favorites. But I do agree with everything that you're saying in terms of how you describe the strength of the episode itself. But moving on to here's the big one, episode 16, ethics. Yes, indeed. A lot happens in this episode, Amr says. It poses major questions around scientific and medical ethics, the limits of cultural respect, and the deeply personal nature of dignity. It's another episode where we see Worf at his most vulnerable, and it doesn't pull punches. We see Worf at he is never more vulnerable at any point necessarily in his career as Worf than in this particular episode. My goodness. Worf's injury, he says, caused by a falling barrel, one hell of a barrel, is more than just physical. For a Klingon, paralysis is considered shameful. Suddenly, Worf is stripped of the strength and honor that define him, and that internalized shame manifests in devastating ways. He refuses to let Alexander see him, isolating himself in his pain, which deeply confuses and hurts his son. Then comes one of the episode's most shocking and emotional turns. Worf asks Riker to help him commit ritual suicide, as Klingon tradition dictates for warriors who suffer such dishonor. Ah, yes, the Hekba, indeed, the name for Klingon ritual suicide in this regard. It says this places Riker in a brutal moral dilemma. He's not just an officer, he's Worf's friend. Riker has to weigh his personal loyalty against his Federation ethics and against what it means to honor another's cultural values. His conversation with Picard about duty, respect, as Klingon and Klingon beliefs adds serious weight. Meanwhile, we have the equally intense subplot between Dr. Crusher and Dr. Russell. Crusher is deeply grounded in patient-first care. Russell, a neurosurgeon with a background in experimental treatments, represents a very different ideology, one that values progress, even at high risk. The tension between them is simmering from the start, but it reaches its peak when Russell uses an unapproved experimental treatment on a dying patient, who then dies. This is where their opposing philosophies fully clash. Russell's defense that the patient would have died anyway, and now medicine has advanced, is cold, but not necessarily wrong from a purely scientific standpoint, he says. But Crusher's response is unforgettable. If you treated him like a person instead of a research subject, he'd still be alive right now. It's a damning line that reframes the entire debate. Crusher isn't just defending medical ethics, she's defending compassion. What makes this subplot so effective, he says, is how it feeds directly into Worf's story. The ethical debate over risk, experimentation, and consent becomes personal when Worf decides to undergo Russell's unproven spinal surgery. Crusher opposes it, but ultimately respects Worf's right to choose, even though it goes against everything she believes about safe and responsible care. This convergence of plot shows just how nuanced the episode is. It's not just about science versus tradition or progress versus caution, it's about agency. Worf's decision reflects his cultural code and personal values, while Crusher is forced to reconcile her medical ethics with the patient's autonomy. It's not easy for either of them, and that's what makes it real, he says. Ethics doesn't offer easy answers, and that's its strength. It makes you sit with the discomfort. It's thoughtful, emotional, and bold, and how it handles issues that are just as relevant now as when aired. Armored, bravo. Bravo, good sir. That is an outstanding characterization of one of the deeper, more intellectually challenging episodes of the show. Did I not tell you the 5th season was just the pinnacle of this show? It really is. And episodes like Ethics absolutely puts that into play. That is a great summation, and it is extremely complex. And one of my favorite sequences is the conversation that Picard has with Beverly, right? Where he's very upfront in terms of, allowing him to undergo the procedure, because she is completely dead set against it, and you completely understand why. But he makes it very clear to her. He says if he can't regain the use of his legs, Worf will kill himself. And she's like, not in my sick bay, he won't. If I have to restrain him and put him in force fields or whatever, she says, forever. And he's like, and how long are you going to keep him there? A week? A month? A year? Right? Like, he's making the case for her that this is the only way to respect his cultural beliefs, the only way to keep him alive, because all the other, and she tried everything under the sun. I remember, like, she tried the physical therapy and like those little boxes or whatever that, the devices, I forget what they were called, to try and help him walk, and it just wasn't doing the trick, right? And that's one of the times where he lashes out at Alexander and yells at him to leave, right? To not see him because he was so ashamed in that light, right? But this experimental surgery was the only thing that was going to keep him alive, or else he was going to kill himself. He could not handle that shame. That shame was going to kill him in that regard. And I love how also the other thing, Amr, about the episode that doesn't give us any easy answers is that Worf technically died. Remember, there's the point where they're convinced that Worf is dead, but his secondary systems kicked in, brought him back to life, and helped him survive the procedure. So if he had been a normal human and not a Klingon, he would have been another casualty that Russell would have just gathered data off of. But because of his extra Klingon biology and physiology, he survived the procedure, and he, became the Worf that we, once again, that we all know and love, the strong warrior for Starfleet, if you will, right? So it was a case where nobody was necessarily proven wrong or right, because everything still worked out at the end. It's a very gray episode in that regard, and I love it. It's fantastic. It presents the classic Star Trek tenets, its classic Star Trek challenges, but again, does not give you any easy answers whatsoever. No, it's an excellent episode. Outstanding, no doubt about it. All right, now on to a controversial episode, episode 17, The Outcast. Amr says, ugh, just as I was enjoying TNG, it starts getting all woke on me with gender politics and stuff. Like, the concept is not even realistic. An alien species that are non-binary? Please, get out of here with this woke DEI nonsense. And then he says, okay, in all seriousness, though, this was a really great episode. I hope I didn't surprise you or offend you and anyone else listening with that crazy opening. I was most definitely trying to be sarcastic, something I believe I'm not good at. I hope my attempt wasn't horrendous. Well, Amr, I will say that if you were just a brand new listener, like sending that, like, out of nowhere, like, that'd be one thing. But I think that we've come to hear enough of your emails that we know where you stand with a lot of these issues. And you certainly know where I stand with a lot of these issues. You've listened to the show long enough, I think, at this point to get an idea of where I sit social, politically. So, yeah, joke taken, sarcasm taken, but you know what? To be honest with you, there are plenty of Star Trek fans out there that react exactly the way that you sarcastically did at the beginning of this, which begs the question: how are they even Star Trek fans in that regard? But either way, let's get through the rest of your thoughts on this particular woke episode, and it is a woke episode. It's a very woke episode, to be honest with you. There are criticisms and critique on how it is ultimately handled, but honestly, for 1992, it's intriguing the way that they did it. And he says this was a really good episode. It's remarkable how boldly it steps into the conversation around gender identity in 1992. For a syndicated sci-fi show airing in a far more conservative media climate, this episode was daring. It doesn't just touch on gender, it centers the entire narrative around it, using the Janai to metaphorically explore issues of non-binary identity, queerness, and societal suppression of difference. This makes it all the more frustrating when people act like modern Star Trek has suddenly become too political or too progressive, he says. I think from what I've seen so far from TNG, and as a newcomer to Star Trek, I believe it has always been political and always progressive. The Outcast is part of that legacy. It's an episode that forces its characters and its audience to question what's natural, what's cultural, and what's humane. I haven't watched it in the modern Star Trek shows, but I heard through online discourse against my will how it's become too political or too woke. I definitely read some stuff that shouldn't be said. Let's just say I read comments online that can only be said by someone hiding behind a screen. Yes, cowards. Absolute cowards, no doubt. And you're 1,000% right, Amr. When people ask the question, when did Star Trek become woke, the answer is September 8th, 1966. That's not a subjective answer either. That's not a matter of opinion. That is objectively factual. September 8th, 1966, with an episode about a creature that is the last of its kind on a planet, and they're deciding whether or not it is ethically okay to kill it because its only means of sustenance is to suck salt out of people's bodies. It's called The Man Trap. It's the first ever episode of Star Trek that aired. It's not the first that was produced, but yes, September 8th, 1966 is when it first aired on NBC, and that is when Star Trek became woke. Period. It is arguably one of the most woke franchises in history. So I don't understand why anybody wearing a red hat, why anybody that claims to be mega, alt-right, Tea Party, whatever the hell you want to call it, how the hell any of these people could even remotely consider themselves Star Trek fans, knowing that this franchise has been diametrically opposed to all of their conservative bullshit from day one. I don't get it. I don't understand. But either way, continuing on with Amir's episode review here, he says, the emotional and narrative crux of the episode, the outcast that is Riker's relationship with Soren. Their connection builds over the course of the story with a quiet sincerity. What starts as a curiosity and camaraderie becomes something deeply personal. Riker sees Soren for who she is, or should I use they, or should I use they in this case? They probably would be most accurate, to be honest with you, since Soren said they feel more like a female. Not what her society demands she be, and for Soren, that's a transformative experience. She begins to openly express her female identity, yes, because she did say she feels more like a female, and desires in defiance of a culture that treats any gender expression as deviant. Their bond is what makes the ending all the more heartbreaking. After Soren is discovered and forcibly subjected to the Janai's version of gender therapy, Riker tries to rescue her, but it's too late. The moment Soren calmly declares she's now correct and no longer desires anything outside of what the Janai deem normal is sadly a painful scene. It's intentionally ambiguous. Did Soren truly come to believe this, or has something vital been stripped away by psychological conditioning? The ambiguity is the point, he says. There's no triumphant rescue or last-minute reversal, just loss. The episode doesn't need to condemn conversion therapy outright. The emotional void left in Soren's eyes says everything. It's a quietly devastating indictment. I personally feel Riker was too late, and she has already been conditioned. Another powerful moment comes in the very end when Picard asks Riker, everything settled with our Janai friends? On the surface, it's a routine question, but it's also Picard's subtle way of showing awareness, concern, and professional restraint. He doesn't press, but he knows something happened. He sees the weight Riker's carrying. Their unspoken understanding in that moment adds another quiet, meaningful layer to their friendship. You know, I will say this, Amr. I think that, you know, individuals like yourself and myself, like, we can detect all of the subtlety and all of the visual cues and all the acting and everything that's inherent in what goes on in the story. But I think for others, probably where a lot of the criticism of this episode comes from is because it's not clearly defined. It's not directly spelled out, right? Some people in that general audience or even in fan audience need things spelled out for them. And I see exactly what you're talking about, and I see exactly where this episode goes, but I think some people might believe, incorrectly so, that the show was advocating for something like gender therapy, because that's how it, gender conversion therapy, if you will, because that's how the episode ended. That's how it was handled, as though that was a happy ending, but we know it wasn't. We know it wasn't a happy ending whatsoever, certainly not for Riker, and not one that we would call for Soren either in that regard. So yeah, it's a heavier, more controversial episode of the show, but certainly not the last. And if you ever get to Deep Space Nine and Voyager and some of the other shows, Amr, you'll see some more stuff like that, no doubt. That absolutely treads into those areas and that subject matter for sure. He ultimately says the Outcast was courageous storytelling for its era and remains emotionally resonant today. All right, now episode 18. Now here's the deal, Amr. I'm going to tell you right now. Episode 18, Cause and Effect. You have now, my good sir, stumbled into one of my top 5 favorite episodes of Star Trek of all time. Cause and Effect is probably my favorite episode in this entire season, and might be my favorite episode of the whole show, as far as TNG is concerned, but my goodness, this episode, oh, I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on this one. Amr says, oh yeah, this was awesome. In this episode, TNG takes a high-concept sci-fi premise such as time loops and fully commits to it, both in execution and emotional tension. The episode leans hard into the time loop structure and doesn't flinch. It restarts and repeats scenes again and again with only minor editing cuts or subtle changes in pacing. That repetition isn't just clever, it's essential. It builds the mystery slowly and immerses you in the disorientation the crew is feeling. The brilliance lies in how small the changes are between loops at first. There's no flashy exposition dump to tell you what's going on. Instead, it's the editing, the acting choices, and little cues like deja vu, a poker game gone strangely, or Beverly's unease with background sounds that start to make you realize something is deeply wrong. As the loops continue, the crew becomes more and more aware, and the tension rises. The story escalates without ever leaving the central narrative, which makes the eventual breakthrough so satisfying. And then, he says, you get that fantastic surprise appearance. Oh, yes. Kelsey Grammer as Captain Morgan Bateson of the USS Bozeman. It's such a cool moment, and it drops just as the mystery is resolved. Grammer, known for Frasier and later as Beast in X-Men, he says, brings a quiet authority to the role, even in a brief cameo. He sells the idea that his crew has no idea they've been caught in a deadly time loop for 90 years. It adds an unexpected scale and weight to the story. What felt like a contained anomaly for the Enterprise turns out to be a long-running tragedy for another ship. And that's what makes the ending so haunting. It leaves you wanting more. The loop is broken. The Enterprise is safe. But the Bozeman now has to grapple with being nearly a century out of time. You can't help but wonder, how will they adjust to this future? What happens to their careers, their families, their sense of purpose? The episode doesn't go there, but that unanswered question lingers in the best way. Cause and Effect is a masterclass in structure and subtlety. It's science fiction that plays with time but never forgets to anchor that play in character and emotion. Amar, I love your descriptions. I do. Your descriptions are absolutely phenomenal. Seriously. Cause and Effect is an outstanding episode. It's considered by many fans to be one of the best episodes. And I will tell you that even though this episode doesn't go further into what happened to Bateson and the crew of the Bozeman after this, I will tell you that Bateson is referenced again in another more recent Star Trek series. I will say that. It's not necessarily a massive reference, but it is indicated that they enjoyed that he and others continued to serve Starfleet in the 24th century, 90 years after their original appointment. But also, I will say that there's Memory Alpha here that when it comes to Star Trek information, Amr, that you want to look up. Just giving you some references here. There's a site called Memory Alpha, which that is a reference to Memory Alpha from that was run by Mr. Ataz in the original series, All Our Yesterdays, I believe, that episode. But Memory Alpha is a website for canonical Star Trek information, a wiki for Star Trek for canonical Star Trek information. There is another site called Memory Beta, which is a reference for non-canonical Star Trek information. There's a lot on Morgan Bateson with respect to Memory Beta, because they gave him a further backstory in books, comics, and they followed the progression. Right, they used Kelsey Grammer. Obviously his portrayal as a model in that regard, and Memory Alpha did as well. Canonically speaking, for sure, it is understood that that's Kelsey Grammer's version of the character. But there is other history on Morgan Bateson and the captain, and the crew rather, of the Bozeman, if you so choose, again, in the books and the comics and elsewhere, right, with respect to, that's not completely canonical. Canonically, I can tell you that he's made one other appearance in another show, a more recent Star Trek series. That's as much as I will say. But yeah, I love this episode because the time loop structure. I love the resolution and the ultimate realization of how to get out of it. The fact that you keep seeing, you're given the two choices, right? It's either decompress the main shuttle bay or use the tractor beam, and every time they keep choosing the tractor beam, and it keeps screwing up because they keep hitting the starboard nacelle, and it triggers the core breach and the explosion, and then just that little subtle clue where he sees the pips on Riker's collar, which allows him to realize, no, it's not my way. It's not the. So it's even another little subtle thing in there where it's it wasn't just that they figured out how to beat the loop. It was that they figured out Data was their key to beating the loop, because not only was he the one that was subtly causing all of the changes that allowed them to pick up on the clues in the final loop, but he also had to admit that the answer in the final loop was that his suggestion was the wrong one. He's like, no, clearly the number 3 means the pips on Riker's collar 3. We need to decompress the main shuttle bay because his solution is what's going to get us out of this. And, have the presence of mind as an android, to think of that. I mean, no hubris, right? No ego or anything like that. But he just goes, oh, clearly my way is not going to work. That's the clue. That's what this means. Let's get out of it that way. No, it's so good. It is a fantastic episode. Top 5 Top 5 TNG for sure. Top 5 Star Trek probably franchise, like the entirety. And there's been so many good episodes through all these series. But yeah, Cause and Effect is absolutely a classic, no question. All right, here's a tough one. Episode 19, The First Duty. Amber says Wesley Crusher is back, and this episode gives us a fascinating glimpse into Starfleet Academy, a place we've heard about but rarely seen in depth. The Academy's atmosphere is formal and intense, focused on molding the next generation of Starfleet officers, but also revealing cracks like peer pressure, arrogance, and the high stakes of cadet life. He says Wesley's arc here is compelling because he's no longer the prodigy kid on the bridge, but a cadet facing a serious moral crisis. After a tragic training accident leads to the death of a fellow cadet, Wesley and his squad, Nova Squadron, cover up the truth to protect their reputations. This sets up a courtroom-style drama focused on ethics, responsibility, and personal integrity. One of the standout elements is the introduction of Boothby, the Academy groundskeeper, he says, a simple man with a profound impact. Boothby's relationship with Picard adds depth to Picard's backstory, reminding us that even the most respected needed guidance and mentorship. Yes, you remember Boothby was mentioned in the previous episode that Wesley was in this season, The Game. So we get to see him here, played by the late, great Ray Walston, I should add. A pivotal moment early in the episode, he says, is Wesley's conversation with Lieutenant Commander Albert. He's the father of Joshua Albert, the cadet who died in the accident. That makes Wesley's early interaction with him even more powerful. It's quiet, dignified, and emotionally loaded. Albert doesn't lash out. His calm grief and need for honesty leave a lasting impression on Wesley. This moment shapes Wesley's conscience. He may not act immediately, but you can see he's shaken. His silence after the encounter with the squad shows the internal conflict clearly. He's caught between the weight of truth and the pressure of belonging. Albert's presence is a moral anchor. Yes, absolutely, would agree with that. Wesley's confrontation with Picard is the episode's emotional and ethical core. Picard's famous line, "The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth. Whether it's scientific truth, historical truth, or personal truth, carries immense weight." I'm going to continue that line really briefly here. Amory says, "It is the guiding principle to which Starfleet is based. And if you can't find it within yourself to stand up and tell the truth, then you don't deserve to wear that uniform." Picard doesn't just demand honesty, he says. He demands courage and accountability. Wesley's silence and complicity aren't judged as evil, but as failures of integrity under pressure. The layered storytelling, he says, shows Wesley wrestling with conflicting loyalties, peer pressure, and fear of consequences. His eventual choice to tell the truth feels earned and meaningful, not simply a plot device. Overall, The First Duty is a grounded, character-driven episode that explores the ideals of Starfleet and the difficult realities of upholding them. Yes, The First Duty is a tough episode. It is. It's a rough one for Wesley. It's a rough one for Picard. It's a rough one for everyone involved. It's a great character study. I will tell you that at least 2 characters from this episode will reappear in the franchise. One of them will reappear before this show is over. I won't say when or how, but I hope you recognize them when you see them. If you don't, the episode will tell you who the person is and remind you. But either way, yeah, it's poignant, I will say that. And then, again, one of the more recent shows on Paramount Plus absolutely uses a character or 2 from this particular episode. So just keep that in mind as you progress forward through the franchise, my good sir. All right, on to episode 20, Cost of Living. Oh, okay. Intriguing to hear your thoughts on this one. This episode is a welcome, calmer shift after some of the heavier, more intense episodes in the season. It brings to focus family, acceptance, and the everyday struggles of life, showing us a more intimate side of the TNG universe. Wow, that is an incredible intro to a review of a Loxana Troy episode. He says, "The return of the Loxana Troy adds her usual bold, vibrant energy. She's often larger than life, but here her relationship with Alexander shines through as a warm and tender aspect of the story. Their interactions provide moments of genuine affection and encouragement, balancing out the episode's lighter and more serious tones. At the same time, the episode explores Worf's evolving role as a father, especially as he navigates Klingon traditions alongside the challenges Alexander faces. This subplot adds depth and vulnerability to Worf's character, reminding us that even the toughest warriors have personal struggles." Yeah, we definitely dig into a lot of Worf's personal story here in this season, aren't we? He says one of the standout scenes is the moment with Loxana, Worf, Alexander, her soon-to-be husband, and Deanna just before heading to the holodeck. It's like a pressure cooker waiting to blow, with Loxana's flamboyance clashing against Worf's stoicism, Alexander caught in the middle. The minister and his assistant and Deanna trying to mediate. The tension is palpable but handled with humor and heart. Overall, Cost of Living offers a character-rich pause in this season, a reminder that family dynamics and personal challenges are just as compelling as galactic conflicts. And I hadn't thought of Cost of Living as being a good tension breaker with respect to all of the other heavier episodes that we definitely deal with. I mean, we've gone from scientific possession and power play to incredible ethical consequences and conflicts in ethics, gender theory in The Outcast, time loops and tragedy, if you will, in cause and effect, personal ethics and emotions in The First Duty. Yeah, no, that's a lot. So yeah, Cost of Living is a good tension breaker in that regard for sure. That's definitely one of the more positive mentions and reviews to a Loaxana Troy episode that I've heard in recent memory. And he says, with that, I'll sign off. That's everything I wanted to talk about for this week. I hope you enjoyed reading this week's email, Ray, and the same goes for anyone listening in. As always, I hope everyone is in good health and high spirits. Until next time, Amr Osama. Amr, your emails are a pleasure to read. I do thoroughly enjoy the TNG stuff, no, without question. But I do enjoy your insights on everything else as well. Whatever, all the other movies, TV, and other sort of media that you are a fan of, all the Andor stuff and everything else. No, it's great, man. You are a welcome addition to the feedback circle along with everybody else. I mean, I'm still humbled that this many people still send in emails and listen to my show on a regular basis. So thank you very much for your feedback. Indeed, always looking forward to more. Good, sir. All right, next up, let's check in with Waliyu Mustafa. His email is titled, appropriately, Happy Super Ironheart Day. Yes, he sent this the day the trailer's released. He says, hey, Ray, let's first talk about Andor. Spoiler warning, y'all. Spoiler warning. Yes, that's right. Andor. Spoiler warning. Andor. Spoiler warning. Ring that gong. Ding. That Ferrix gong. Ding. All right, here we go. He says, I choked up at the very last scene of the final episode. Bix is holding her baby, not realizing that Andor will never return and knows he has a child with her. Time out. So, just wanted to point out, while you, through no fault of your own, that you were the spoiler. You were the notification that came up on my phone, on Friday, before I had a chance to finish Andor. And fortunately, I saw the word baby. That was all I saw. I saw the word baby. It was like, nope, delete this, delete. I haven't seen it. So, not your fault. Absolutely cannot be blamed for it. I was just pointing it out that was part of the delay that I was involved in with respect to Friday and why it took me a while to see everything in that regard. So either way, not a problem. Just thought that was funny. Anyway, he says, side note, do we think the baby is Poe Dameron? Some fans think so. I've heard that. Why do we think it's Poe? Why do we think that we're? I want to look that up really quick, just briefly. Where is that coming from? Okay, I have no idea where this theory comes from, but apparently it has been soundly debunked because there's a novel called Star Wars: The Force Awakens, Shattered Empire. It's a comic book series rather, that reveals his parents are Shara Bey, a rebel pilot, and Kes Dameron, a sergeant for the Rebel Alliance. There was this talk about the possibility that Poe was adopted by Kes and Shara, but even ignoring that, it doesn't make any sense because it would require Bix giving up the baby who's already several months old, or worse, her death, and none of that is congruent with what we saw in Andor. She clearly went to Mina Rao to protect her baby, so it would be nonsensical for her to then give the baby to Shara and Kes for any reason, and if Bix died, it would entirely undermine her character in Andor. There's no reason to kill her, and seemingly the only path would be giving Poe a biological link to Bix and Cassian, which simply put, wouldn't be worth it. I'm reading this from a Screen Rant article by Liz Declan that was published 3 days ago. That's a crazy theory. I know fans are good for crazy theories, but what the hell? I mean, look, I applaud the attempt to connect the sequel trilogy to all of this. I like that, and I hope there is more connective tissue that is established, but no. I don't think. I never thought that until you brought it up, and I've seen the theory, but this is the first time I have really talked about it. No, clearly that's not the case. But either way, getting to the rest of your email, Waliyu, he says, anyway, I love the way the show came to a head. We see Dedra in prison for her brash actions in her attempt to get Luthen to talk. Clea was doing what had to be done and took Luthen off life support because that's what he would have wanted. Partagaz taking his own life because he knows he's done for. Orson Krennic being Orson Krennic. You just knew Dedra's days were numbered when Krennic was interrogating her. Just didn't expect her to be sent to the same prison Andor was at in the first season. Oh, yeah. And you know what's... So the thing is before I got to see the episodes on Friday, I did see, obviously, being on social media, people have been posting gifs and also like images. I saw the image of him like pointing at Dedra's head, but I didn't know it was him, number one, and I didn't know what was going on because I just saw the look on her face, and I'm like, what does that? I had no clue, no context for whatever was happening in that scene. And then I watched the scene, and I was like, wow, Krennic is a real asshole. I mean, he has been from the first moment we've seen him, way back when we first saw Rogue One, and this just, Ben Mendelsohn just is such a delightfully, viciously evil and arrogantly assholish character throughout this franchise. He's done a great job with it, and he was outstanding. And yeah, and this was more than just like everybody being thrown under the bus. You know what this honestly reminded me of, and I'll talk to a bit more about this now, because my Andor final thoughts are like coming through as each of you bring up the show again. But one of the things that popped into my head, and this was a collection of things, right? Seeing Dedra and like her reaction to everything, and her, them throwing her under the bus and being arrested and imprisoned as a result of her actions, right? What happened to Hirt, right? Like, he's the one that took over and he's leading the charge, and then he literally dies as a result of being used as a shield by K2SO. It was funny, and yet, wow, just really rough. And yeah, Partagaz taking his own life. What it reminded me of, to be honest with you, it reminded me of an episode of Rebels. And, Anthony, I think you'll appreciate this, is, remember the episode of Rebels, everybody, where Zeb and Callus are stuck on that planet together, right? And, they have to rely on each other to survive. It's like an enemy mine situation, if you will, for people who haven't seen that movie with Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr., may he rest in peace. Like, it's enemies having to rely on each other to survive, that whole thing, before they eventually get rescued. And the most telling part about that to me was like, that was the beginning of Callus's like redemption arc and his defection arc, if you will, right? But I will never forget the end of that episode, because when Zeb was rescued and he got back to the Ghost and he was warmed very welcomely back to his family, Ezra, Kanan, Hera, Sabine, like they all welcomed him very warmly, and it was like he was reunited, and it was very emotional, and he was, they missed him and they were glad that he was alive, right? The compassion was there. Whereas when Callus got back to his post, he was very, there was no greeting. There was no, oh, glad we rescued you. It was just extremely cold. He was treated like another number, and he just sat in his cell very coldly, because that's the Empire. The Empire has no compassion. The Empire doesn't give a shit. There are no friendships. There is no warmth. There is no compassion whatsoever, even amongst officers. And that was completely what I saw in these last few episodes of Andor. It was just, that's the cold, calculating lack of compassion of the Empire, right? No one cares. No one gives a shit. Here it didn't care what happened to Dedra. And, like, she didn't care what necessarily happened to him, but she wanted something, right, at that point, because she had gotten some compassion out of her relationship with Cyril, and he's gone. Now she's got nothing. Absolutely nothing. And Partagaz is the ultimate coward. He's the Hitler in a bunker, basically, right? And that was another image that I saw beforehand without any context, was I saw, when they're supposed to be leading him down, right? And he's like, he told the dude to give him a moment. And he walks outside and he stands outside the door with the other stormtroopers, and they were like, caption this photo. And I was like, well, I have no idea what's going on in this photo. And then the scene came up and I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. And you hear that laser blast, just like, damn. Partagaz going out like a coward, like a cowardly Hitler after everything that he did. And it's just like, man, the cold, non-compassionate nature of the Empire absolutely reared its head, and it just reminded me of the end of that Rebels episode so much. And it just really speaks to how consistent they've been with the messaging and the emotional complexity of, how cold and calculated the Empire actually is in this regard. There's no regard whatsoever. I mean, everybody was out to get everybody else, and nobody cared what happened to everybody else, right? There was absolutely no compassion. You had to look out for yourself in that regard. So Dedra's alive and in prison, completely alone and isolated. Who knows what the hell happens to her? She probably blows up or some casualty elsewhere, right? If she doesn't find a way to defect, and how would she defect? There's no redemption arc for her. She's horrible, right? She got what was coming to her in many ways in that regard, right? What remorse are you supposed to feel for a character like her? And then Hirt, that's still funny. I mean, it's just darkly hilarious. He just turns into a shield and gets shot up by his own officers in that regard during that siege. And then Partagaz, the ultimate coward, is like, oh, this is your way out. Just a blaster to the head. Okay, coward ass. Yeah, absolutely. Just, man. unbelievable, but, very well played in that regard. But Wally says, the highlight for me, though, was K2SO, the manner with which he dispatched the ISB troopers to save Andor, Clea, and I forget who the other dude was, Melshi. But K2 was just as ruthless in a funny way. Alan Tudyk does well with the character. He does. He really does. And the great thing is he remembered the character enough. It played very well into Rogue One. It really did. Like the characterizations of K2SO play really well into Rogue One. It's crazy to think that that's a short period of time, only a year that he and Cassian necessarily had together before the final battle, before the final end, for all of them as part of Rogue One at Scarif. But he says the scene where Andor is telling Bail, Mothma, Draven, and the other leaders about the weapon, and they didn't believe him, I wanted to give their heads a wobble. Glad Draven and Mothma came to their senses and convinced Bail, and saw Guerrera already high on the fumes, having a go at Bail and Mothma for apparently encroaching on Jedha. But seriously, what a brilliant show and a great addition to the Star Wars legacy. It bridges the gap between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope really well. Bravo, Tony Gilroy and Kathleen Kennedy. I will be surprised if this show does not win any Emmy Awards. Thank you for bringing Kathleen Kennedy up really quick, because there's something that has come out recently that I absolutely wish to highlight, and I will talk about it right now. Because you all very clearly know how I feel about the whole Kathleen Kennedy situation, and this past week, an interview that Tony Gilroy had with Vanity Fair, none other than Anthony Breznican. That's right, the individual who wrote the big Vanity Fair piece on the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League, when it was finally released 4 years ago, right? Like, it's same author, and this was a big, huge piece talking about the series finale of Andor. And there's a question here that Breznican asks Tony Gilroy, and he says, even before she was Lucasfilm's president, you worked with Kathleen Kennedy for years on the Bourne movies. Everybody is calling Andor the most grown-up Star Wars story told so far. Can you describe her role in this? And Gilroy says, well, she kind of snuck me into this thing. And Breznican says, she trapped you? And he laughs at it and he says, yeah, she kind of seduced me into it. There was a period of time where I really wanted the show to die, and I wanted to get out of it. When COVID came, I thought, oh, thank God, COVID will kill the show and I won't have to do it. So there was this long period of time where I was like, I can't believe she got me into this. And Breznican says, why did you want it to die? And Gilroy said, because we had scripts going and I was going to direct a bunch of episodes and we were in London, we were casting, and I was just absolutely naive about what it would take to make the show. I really did not know what I was doing at all in terms of the scope of the work. So when COVID came, it was like, oh, you know what? That's a sign from God, no show. But the irony is that during that spell, we really figured out how to make it. We figured out a system to do it and got enough of a reset and a deep breath. And here comes the big quote, the big question, where Breznican asks, how did Kennedy help with that? And Gilroy says, quote, she has protected the show and protected me and wrangled a team together. When we started challenging Kathy just kept saying yes. Oh, I'm going to put the first scene in a brothel. Okay. I'm going to have them kill 2 cops. Okay. We want the production designer from Chernobyl. Okay, good idea. She backed our play and got everything that we were doing. We've been through everything, she and I, on this. All the good and all the bad. There's no show without her. For all the shit that she takes online, it's just insane. This show exists because she forced it to happen. What a tough job she has, man. End quote. There you have it. All of the Kathleen Kennedy haters, all the ones that they shit on, decisions with The Mandalorian, they shit on The Acolyte, they shit on the stuff that happened with the movies, and everyone in this fan base that dare call themselves a Star Wars fan, that drags Kathleen Kennedy's name through the mud for their own pathetically selfish and lightly, if not heavily misogynistic reasons, can pound the biggest pile of sand in their mother's basement they can find. This is Tony Gilroy, the creator of Andor, the showrunner, backing Kathleen Kennedy, talking about how vital she was, how protected she made him and the rest of that cast and crew feel. There is no show without her. Period. Everybody shut the f*** up when it comes to trashing Kathleen Kennedy. You heard me. I'm going to censor myself again. Shut the f*** up with respect to Kathleen Kennedy slander. It will not be tolerated. Kathleen Kennedy is the boss of Lucasfilm. Anyone dragging her, not worthy of respect. And that sentiment doesn't just come from me, it comes from the showrunner of what is being hailed as the best piece of Star Wars ever made, right? All the Andor people, all the Andor fans, all the people that say that all Star Wars should be like Andor, Kathleen Kennedy's responsibility. If you're going to drag her for all the shit that you don't like, then you have to praise her for all the shit that you do like, because she's in charge of all of it. Period. Bar none. So take your misogynistic heads out of your fucking asses and seriously shut the fuck up. Man, you know what? All those bleeps, I think I just might do a Son Just Don't rant with respect to Kathleen Kennedy, because seriously, that got me fired up again. Kathleen Kennedy slander is so disgusting to me. I really hate it. I really, really hate it. But, all right. Just wanted to highlight that. Thank you for bringing that up, Wally. I appreciate that. Let's get to your thoughts on Ironheart. He says, I saw the trailer and really enjoyed it. There's definitely an Acolyte feel to it, with both Dominique Thorne and Anthony Ramos in the same vein as Amandla Stenberg and Manny Jacinto, with the whole mentor-student vibe. Oh yes, I absolutely said the same thing the other day in Flight Alert. He says, I have no idea who the Hood is, neither do I, but it will be interesting to see how all this plays out. We have 6 episodes in total, with the first 3 streaming on June 24th, and then the last 3 will be released a week apart. I think I heard rumblings from some fans thinking Marvel was dropping all 6 episodes over 2 weeks, but this doesn't appear to be the case. That's good. All right, so 3, so they're doing it like in 3s again. Same with Andor. All right, I'll have to figure out exactly how to do that for Flightbox, but we'll see. We'll see how that works out. Oi, good grief. This whole 3-episode imbroglio thing, it might be, because they love to release on Tuesdays, late on Tuesdays, so I can't watch it that late, so I don't know. I'll figure something out for it, but we're definitely talking about Ironheart on Flightbox. It's absolutely happening. But either way, he says, sure, it seems like Marvel is not giving Ironheart the proper marketing it fully deserves, but I can't speak for their reasoning as to why it's taken this long to release a trailer for it, especially when you think back to other shows that have had their trailers released earlier and gotten a decent amount of marketing for it, and it was a bit of a bad idea to release the trailer on the same day that we get a new Superman trailer. Yes, it's weird, because it just seems like Marvel's sandbagging it, doesn't it? It seems like, okay, Disney's smarter than this, aren't they? Than to, wait so long to release a trailer and then drop it on the same day as a movie trailer, which, regardless of what anybody feels about DC, there's no way that Ironheart as a character, with all due respect to Riri Williams, is going to overshadow Superman. This is not going to happen. And that has nothing to do with race. That has nothing to do with, bigotry or misogyny of any kind. That's just history. That's just Superman's been around for well over 80 years, almost 90 years at this point, right? So it's not, has nothing to do with that. But why would you release the trailer on the same day? I don't know. Either way, we can enjoy both of them and we can look forward to both of them. But that being said, I will note that we're about the halfway point into Wally U's email here, maybe a little less than the halfway point. The majority of this email is going to be about what you would think it would be about, considering Wally U is our resident Superman fan. I'm surprised that if it wasn't for all the other stuff going on with Andor and Ironheart, his email would be entirely this. But here we go. He says, that brings me to the main event. This Superman trailer. Oh my goodness. Wow, he says. I thought the first Man of Steel trailer was great, but this one, another level of awesomeness. Clark lets Lois interview him as Superman, though not realizing how much of a hard-hitting journalist she is, that she full-on interrogates him. And the way he gets on the defensive, damn. I spoke about it in my reaction video about how Superman is just a man doing the right thing. And again, it brings us back to real-world scenarios. Would someone like Superman just stand idly by and watch innocent people die? No, like he told Lois, he was not acting on behalf of anyone but himself. We see the Engineer and Lex Luthor working together, he says. I have a feeling Lex Luthor has employed the Authority to help take out Superman. There's even that one scene in the trailer with Metamorpho and the guards come in and swipe at Superman. Look closely at Metamorpho's hand. It's glowing green. Leads me to believe he must be working for Lex too, or maybe it's a ploy of some sort and he's helping Superman to escape. One notable member of the Authority, he says, who reminds me of Black Noir from The Boys, is Ultraman. Yeah, that's a good point. It does have a similar look. He is fully dressed in black, but he has a U on his chest, which is Ultraman's symbol. But again, I think this might be a misdirection, and it could be someone else entirely. Of course, Ultraman in the comics is an Earth 3 evil version of Superman who is part of the crime syndicate along Superwoman and Owlman. They take no prisoners. We now have the official name for the team of superheroes, he says, the Justice Gang. And speaking of, how awesome was it to see more of Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific? And Crypto is fighting with the Engineer to protect the fortress from her and Lex. If anything happens to Crypto, there will be riots. I've already seen people say that. No, nothing can happen to the dog. Don't hurt the dog. Nothing can happen to the dog. I don't think James Gunn is going to do anything to the dog because he's a dog lover and a dog owner himself. And Crypto is modeled after his own dog, Ozu, who he has self-proclaimed as an asshole. But still, I don't think anything's going to happen to the dog. I think the dog is going to be safe, hopefully. Dog's going to fight. But at any rate, he says, I do think James Gunn has a hit on his hands with this movie. It has all the elements from the comics and other versions of the character. Hence the legacy in the title when the project first started. And what you said in your Flight Alert episode, it blends both Donner, Reeve, Routh, and Snyder Cavill versions. I think there is something here for everyone to enjoy. Unless you're part of the cultists, the less said about them the better. Speaking of morons, I had to block someone on Threads who was obviously taking potshots at Zack Snyder's Superman when they were stating how happy they were to see a more hopeful-looking Superman as opposed to constant stoicism. Yeah, not on my feed, son. Yeah, you know what? And that's the funny part too, Wally, is I really do believe, I've told John this and a couple of others, I really do think that a number of them, when they watch this movie and realize it's not Superman the movie Redux, I think they're going to turn on James Gunn. I most certainly do. And if they don't, then they're just going to be sitting in a pit of delusion, acting like there's nothing about Man of Steel and Snyder in this film, or they're going to lie to us and tell us, oh, well, Gunn did it better. And Gunn got it from somewhere, guys, okay? And if he didn't think it was worth a damn, he wouldn't put it in his movie, but clearly he has and is. And I can't wait to see the other shit from Man of Steel and BVS era that will be in the movie, and I know it will be, right? I just really have that feeling, as my cautious optimism rises a bit here, I really have that feeling that we're going to get a film that breaks the brains of those who think it's going to be Christopher Reeve and Richard Donner Redux. They're not going to get that. They're going to get some elements of it. They're going to try and cling to the little superficial things that they think separates it from Man of Steel. But at the end of the day, I think this film is going to have way more in common with Man of Steel and BVS than they think it will. It already does, right? With some of the stuff we're seeing in this trailer and these clips, it already has more in common with the Snyder films than we could have thought, to be honest with you. So I am looking forward to that conversation, no doubt. So this next sentence from Wally, I can absolutely agree with maybe more than anything else he says. He says, I can just about live with the music. Yes, I would have preferred if David Cornsweet's Superman had a different theme altogether, but you can see what Gunn is trying to do here. He's keeping the legacy alive, and that means all aspects of Superman. Yes, and like I mentioned in Flight Alert, Wally, that at least it's not just a straight up nerfing, right? You know, it's not lazy. It's not lazily done, you know, like what Elfman did in Justice League. Oh, what an atrocity that was. But like it's at least they're reformatting it, and they're being like they're being clever and creative with it. Like I said, in that first part with the Lois and Superman discussion, right? When it's the drum beats, and you know what the drum beat pattern is, right? And it's just it's the Williams theme, but it's not just copy and paste. They're actually like, you know, giving it some flair and changing it around and doing some innovative things. But I can live with that. I'm with you that I can live with that for sure, no doubt. He says, I'm going to reread both All-Star Superman and Superman for All Seasons before the movie is out. And speaking of the movie's release, my plan is to watch the movie as many times as possible over the course of the opening week. I'll be in my costume and going to different cinemas where I live and experience it in the best way possible. I'll be taking my kids to a showing as well, and they will be dressed up too. As a Superman fan, we're going to be eating good in July. I mean, we will be feasting, he says. Feels good being a DC fan right now. Overall, it has been a good week comic book-wise. We got the new trailer for Peacemaker last week, Ironheart trailer, and now Superman. Let's all celebrate as fans and enjoy the ride. Anyway, if anyone wants to hear more of my thoughts on the trailer, he says just go to YouTube and look for CK61938. That's my channel, he says. I will leave it here and bid you farewell, Ray. My family is doing well, by the way, apart from Micah, who's being a proper horrible toddler, keeps clinging to his mom, and won't come to me when she needs a break from him. Otherwise, all is good. Give my best to Shonda and enjoy the weekend. Thank you, Wally Mustafa. Thank you as always, Wally. You give my best to the family. Shonda is doing well as best as we can through, you know, what we're dealing with in real life and all that. And I hear you, man. July is going to be a great month, right? You know, look, we've got, like you said, we got a Peacemaker trailer, we got Superman trailer, we got Ironheart trailer, and then when we get to July, remember, we got Superman on the 11th, and we got Fantastic Four First Steps, which, of course, our good buddy Phil Barker, who does have an email this week. He's excited for that. I know that's his number one. We'll probably talk a little bit about that when we get to his email. But yeah, it's a good time. It really is. It's a good time to be a fan of the medium, let alone be a DC fan. We've got some optimism, man. We do. We have some hopeful optimism, if you will, right? We can actually like turn that into a good phrase and not the bastardization that Jeff Johns, perverted it into however many years back when they pulled the rug out from under us with the DCEU plans. Never mind all that. Putting all that aside, this is the DC Studios era, and those of us rational fans, which is the majority of us, again, we're hoping for a good start. We're hoping for a movie that we all enjoy, that celebrates the legacy of one of our favorite characters and begins a brand new era for DC cinematically. So here's hoping, fingers crossed. We are less than 2 months away. All right. Thank you as always, Wally, for the feedback. Greatly appreciated, of course. All right, let's go back to some Andor discussion and check in with Stuart Little with his email titled this week, Somehow Kano Lloyd Didn't Return. But he doesn't start off with Andor. He says, hello. Before we get to the main event, I want to weigh in briefly on the discussions around Thunderbolts marketing that has been a topic on this show the last couple of weeks. Precautionary Thunderbolts spoiler wall. Yes, for anybody who has not seen it yet. There are some who have not seen it just yet. It's only been a couple of weekends. But at any rate, Stu says this is really more of a question. But how come if they're going to go with marketing the movie with the new Avengers title on posters and such, they aren't also putting out new Avengers branded Wheaties boxes like in the movie's mid-credits scene? They actually did do a limited edition Thunderbolts branded Wheaties box with no Wheaties inside that you had to buy through the Wheaties site. But maybe after long enough they could actually take advantage of this gag more with real-life new Avengers Wheaties in stores? And precautionary Thunderbolts spoiler wall. Valid point. I wonder if product placement might, trigger some brand confusion. I don't know. But, I did mention that we were going to look to see, because I thought that the whole new Avengers thing was a marketing stunt that was going to, try and stave off second week drop off. And as I take a look now at Thunderbolts box office, we see that it is at $286.7 million worldwide, according to Box Office Mojo. Those are its most recent numbers as I'm recording this on a Saturday. With respect to second week drop off, apparently, according to Deadline, they updated this through Sunday about a week or so ago, or almost a week ago. It said that its second week drop off is 55%, and it claims that this is still a great hold for an MCU title, even though it's lower than expected. It took in $33 million in its second weekend. Said it wasn't far from Shang-Chi's 54% and certainly better than Captain America Brave New World's 68%. Okay, all right. I mean, so I guess it was negligible in terms of whether or not the new Avengers marketing staved off a second week drop off. I mean, okay, is it slightly better than Brave New World? Yes, I guess, according to these numbers, but I don't know how successful that was for them as a marketing stunt, right? I don't want to say that it was, completely unnecessary, right? And for the people that still regard it as a massive spoiler, I mean, that's subjective. You can take it however you wish. If you feel like, that was something that you didn't want to know and that was a massive spoiler for you, okay. I mean, that is your business. I totally get it. It's all subjective. For me, I never regarded it as this incredibly massive spoiler, with respect to anything story-wise, because you still need to watch the movie to understand what the context of New Avengers is, right? So to me, I don't look at it as that kind of a spoiler, but others can, and I guess they do, but, I guess it was a negligible impact with respect to staving off the second week drop-off. Either way, all right, let's get to your main event here, Andor Week 4 spoilers. Here we go. Spoiler alert. Andor, spoiler alert. Andor, spoiler alert. All right. Ferrix Gong's engaged. Here we go. Stu says, yeah, so turns out I took some things said about Andy Serkis returning at face value. Looking into it, it was probably the headline from who else but the Kings of Clickbait screen rant that said Andy Serkis confirmed it when all he said was the reaction to Kano Loy meant something. Boo, screen rant, boo. Well, yeah, screen rant. I know I quoted them earlier in terms of that whole Poe Dameron thing, but no, Screen Rant by and large is not a trustworthy outfit in that regard, especially not when it comes to any type of scooper information. So yes, boo, Screen Rant, boo. But Stu says, that said, what a finale. Quieter than one might suspect and some have complained about, but it's keeping with the show's spirit entirely. Plus, Rogue One is the actual finale, and that had plenty of fireworks. But opening with Luthen and Clea's backstory was great. Something one could have built a whole mini-series around, perhaps, but the story it told and the bigger spotlight on Clea making this more her story than Luthen's was brilliant. Clea's mission to, how shall I put it, make Luthen lose the will to live was heartbreaking, but also painfully realistic as Luthen just dies and doesn't wake up for a second to say goodbye or anything. One of the hallmarks of this show is how it brought a stark realness to the way things happen that lacks contrived Hollywood convention. That said, he says it was also nice that Clea got out alive, something she clearly never even hoped for and even seems scared of happening, and the final scene showing her seeing what she helped to build and start to smile was pretty good. Yes, that was, I did like that. It was because you're right. There was this like revelation, this realization that Clea almost didn't want to live. Like she had accepted that the only way that this was going to work and like the only way that the rebellion was actually going to prosper was if she and Luthen died. And one of the things that I really like about the dynamic of Andor's characters is this divide that, clearly exists within respect to the idea that this is an alliance. That you have differing viewpoints that come into play, and the majority of them are playing nice. The majority of them are civil on, that council that's at Yavin, right? And Yavin this, Yavin that, like that location thrown at us. I mean, we've all known Yavin for years, right? But now that name means so much more to us, Yavin and Yavin 4, than it ever did even before Rogue One or before, Andor in that regard, right? But like this idea that it's this alliance of all these different viewpoints and they're not always going to agree, but then you have some that really staunchly don't agree. And in this case, Luthen and Clea didn't agree with the execution, and the others didn't necessarily see them as a benefit, didn't, because they were doing all the dirty work, right? It's almost like the Rebel Alliance was like the official military, right? The official armed forces, if you will, Army and Navy, Air Force, whatever, right? And then like Luthen and Clea, they're the CIA, right? They're the ones doing the dirty work. They're the ones doing the covert operations, right? The stuff that the dark stuff that the squeaky clean officers of the Rebel Alliance don't want to get caught doing, right? And Andor, of course, Cassian, he was absolutely in the middle of all that. And so there was a divide thematically in terms of how to do it and how to proceed, right? Luthen and Clea are telling lies, they're impersonating, events, and they're running, the art gallery and all the secret communications, and they're doing everything in terms of like clandestine spy work, if you will, right? Like they're the wet workers, right? They're the ones that are doing all the spy craft in this show. And it is in direct conflict with some of the actual like militaristic structure of the actual rebellion in that regard, right? And so they had always accepted that this was going to end with their deaths. This is going to end with the demise of not only their operation, but themselves. And so that's why she was afraid. And that's what Cassian was trying to convince her. Like, no, I'm not going to let you die here. You're going to come and, experience the victory and experience what we're building and the actual resistance, how the rebellion is going to defeat this thing. Right. And yeah, that little moment where, and just realizing that, she, at least at this point, like we don't know what Clea's ultimate fate was, but right now we just know that she's alive the last time that we saw her, which is more than we can say for Cassian, right? So that was cool. I did like that. I really did like, because I didn't think she was going to survive. I thought both she and Luthen weren't going to make it off of Coruscant alive. The fact that she at least did, I really did like that. I really appreciated that. When Stu says, in fact, it was pretty cool overall that we got a number of characters surviving with open endings. Wilmon and his Gorman girlfriend, and Vel, for instance. I'm just not going to think too hard about the fact that just a few days later, a bunch of rebels are involved in the Battle of Scarif and die. Plenty didn't, so maybe they were among them. We also got a scene where Cassian and Vel toast various names of people lost along the way, including also mentioning the Aldani from Season 1's heist, which seems to confirm an implied aftermath to that. Also, the final scene with Bix and Child may have seemed a little trite, but I read in an interview with Tony Gilroy saying that he intended it as making things more bittersweet, as Cassian would die without even knowing of this other life he could have had if he'd made it past Scarif. I just hope Filoni can leave this plot strand alone and not have a 12-year-old Cassian Andor Jr. appear in The Mandalorian and Grogu or something. Well, what if he does, Stu? Like, what's so wrong about that? Like, seriously, we've seen lineages and we've seen babies born that grow up to be like leaders and whatnot in this franchise. I mean, what is so wrong with that? Like, I realize it's subjective, and you can feel however way you want with respect to it, but I don't think that, I mean, I don't think it's so tried. I guess I'm not as cynical in that regard. If they decide, I'm not saying they have to do something with the baby, but if they do, it's not going to bother me. I'm fine with that. It doesn't bug me in that regard. So and the bittersweet. I think it's interesting that you thought that the baby and Bix were trite until you heard that, like, Gilroy wanted to torture us further. Like you're okay with torture. You're okay with psychological torture and making things harder on the audience because, yeah, like I said earlier, that makes Cassian's end all the more heartbreaking. That happy ending he never realized with Bix, and didn't even know he had a child on the way, right? Like that just, so all the rest of us are in pain, and you're like, oh good, okay, at least it's not something that's been overused in your opinion. Hey, it's all subjective, man, but no, I don't have any issues if they decide to do anything with grown up Cassian, with grown up the grown up version of the child between Bix and Cassian. But we'll see. Probably not, but we'll see. But Luthen's end, he says, also brought about Dedra's, and it was good full circle that what brought about her initial rise in the ISB is also what brought her down due to her obsession and need to make bringing in Luthen a personal triumph. I got a bit of Gordon Ramsay idiot sandwich energy from Krennic stressing her down, and the fact that what tips the rebellion off to the Death Star is her being accidentally added to intelligence briefings is very prescient to, oh, I don't know, someone being inadvertently added to a group chat on war plans? Oh. Okay. Briefly here. If you watched that show and didn't get all of that, there was so much real world context in that show, whether Tony Gilroy meant to do it or not, it was there. It's all there. There's so much there. And yeah, that's part of it. That's absolutely part of it. He says, I also let out a jabba like, oh, at the first glimpse of Dedra in the prison jumpsuit. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Partagaz also lost the will to live, he said, at least long enough for what I headcanon would have been Darth Vader making an I'm not the Emperor's plumber, but I am here to fix a leak joke before force choking him to death. Oh, yeah, absolutely. He said the ISB took a lot of L's in this. In fact, including K2's funny, scary massacre of the tactical team in the finale, which I have to wonder if it's to be taken as another Rogue One nod, as a flip side to Vader's big rebel killing spree at the very end. The humor and unstoppable nature of the character was a nice treat after so much of the show being about underdogs who really felt the threat of failure and death at every turn. And they kind of foreshadowed that too, Stu, because when the K2 droids are like, when they show up, when they're part of the Gorman massacre, that's the most terrifying droids I've ever looked in this franchise. Seriously, I mean, more terrifying than droidicas, more terrifying than anything we saw. And the K2 droids are absolutely bone-chilling when they are used as killing machines in a massacre. So, yeah, that was funny and yet also scary when K2SO is just mowing down a hallway full of ISB agents. And yeah, it was kind of this juxtaposition with the Vader killing spree at the end of Rogue One. So yeah, I do like that connection. He says Andor himself gets a good ending in the show, even if it's more transitional to what he's going to be doing in Rogue One, but the fact that he's resolved to rescue Clea and not just get away with the message she delivers shows him embodying a bit of the hope that the rebellion is starting to form now for the future. You could say Season 2 was more of a general rebellion show that didn't focus in so much on Cassian as the first year, but I do think Luna made the most of that, and he got to cross over with the other threads a fair bit more, and it made him kind of the linchpin of everything. Overall, this is a top-tier Star Wars project, and I feel very grateful they gave it to us and kept the focus it had and the messaging that went with it. I think there was room for more stuff following these themes or even just the general subject of the non-Force users fighting for the galaxy, and I hope we can get it. Take care, Stu. Well, like I mentioned earlier, Stu, if what Tony Gilroy tells us about Kathleen Kennedy is true, and there's no reason not to believe him in terms of her protecting the idea and her being a big proponent of the idea, then I think we could get more of this, most certainly. And listen, Rogue One, for all the talk about Star Wars films, Rogue One is one of the more successful. That broke $1 billion, right? It made $1 billion, and we can say that, listen, the sequel trilogy, for people that want to poo-poo it, whatever, those films succeeded. Don't give me this shit about how all the grosses were going down or whatever. No, those movies succeeded, okay? Solo didn't succeed, and there were other reasons that went into that, right? But Andor is being hailed as one of the greatest, if not the best, of the Star Wars shows, no doubt, right? So yeah, I do hope that this does lead to more of this types of content. More of the boots on the ground, and like you said, the non-Force users fighting for the galaxy. Yes, absolutely. Thoroughly enjoy that perspective. Right? The Force users, I'm not anti Skywalker Saga like a number of other fans are, but I do like seeing what the non-Force users do. So yeah, Andor, fantastic. And like I said before, anybody that says my favorite Star Wars trilogy is Andor Season 1, Andor Season 2, and Rogue One, hey, I will accept that. I will accept that answer in terms of favorite Star Wars trilogy. I've seen that from a few people on threads. I will absolutely accept that answer, subjectively speaking. But thank you, as always, for the feedback, Stu. Greatly appreciated. Believe it or not, we've still got 5 more people's emails to get through. After all this, it's been like 2.5 hours. So let's keep going. Let's get to Omari Daniels. His email is titled, Superman Can Have More Than One Theme. He says, Hey Ray, hope you're doing well. Enjoyed your breakdown of the Superman trailer. I wanted to echo what you've said about the music ever since the teaser trailer. Corrin Sweat deserves to have his own theme, just as Christopher Reeve, Henry Cavill, and Tyler Hoechlin did. However, I was surprised to get so much pushback when expressing a similar thought online. I saw 2 defenses. The John Williams is the ultimate Superman theme and must always be used, or people made comparisons to James Bond and Godzilla, which I think is just pushing the goalpost. Between the Superman animated series, Hans Zimmer, or Superman and Lois, we've had new Superman themes that didn't try to imitate what came before. He says in the same way diehard DCEU fans are told to move past Man of Steel, fans as a whole should, but are reluctant to move past the John Williams theme and the Donner films as a whole. The Williams theme is great, there's no denying that, but just like Batman, every new Superman should be allowed to have his own theme. I don't know if some fans will ever let that go, but eventually they'll need to look in the mirror and realize that they're clinging to the past just as much as the hardcore Snyder fans that they love to argue with. Keep up the good work, Omari. Amari, thank you for the email, and you're not saying anything I don't already agree with. I'm with you on all of it. Now, the one thing that I would say, first of all, with respect to the pushback that you're getting, right? The idea that the John Williams is the ultimate Superman theme and must always be used. Well, again, I can go to Batman, I can go to Spider-Man, I can say, hey, did you want to hear Tom Holland's Spider-Man swinging around to Spider-Man? Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Does that really fit his Spider-Man in that regard, or Andrew Garfield's, right? Like, don't hear anybody saying that, and we don't hear anybody saying that about Batman either, as far as what themes to use for them. But the other one, I've heard people make those same comparisons as well to James Bond and Godzilla, and I agree with you that it is pushing the goalpost, because, again, we're looking at the breadth of one character, even with multiple actors playing that character. It's all supposed to be assumed within a similar continuity, right? Like, I mean, obviously things change, as far as time period and as far as like enemies and like setup, but we're not definitively told with either Godzilla or James Bond that a new universe is starting, right? We're not seeing like, oh well, this is the new Blofeld, or this is the new Spectre, or this is the new Felix Leiter, right? We're not told that. It's all happening in one type of continuous form. It's almost like The Simpsons, where like they haven't aged at all in 30 plus years, right? Almost 40 years in this regard, right? So there really aren't any parameters placed on either of those, so you can keep James Bond's theme the same because he's not playing a different version of the character. Like it's like, okay, like Connery's version of Bond is still different than Roger Moore. It's different than Timothy Dalton. It's different than Pierce Brosnan. It's different than Daniel Craig. But they're all still playing 007. It's not like they're all of a sudden playing a different version of Bond or a different. They're playing their own personal version of it. But all the other stuff is still the same. MI6 is still the same. Q is still the same. M is still the same. Yes, those change actors. Although Q didn't change actors. Q and M didn't change actors for a long time. Right? Not until many years later. And then, even when it got to be Judi Dench, she was M for like all of Pierce's movies and for like the first 3 of Daniel Craig's movies, right? And it wasn't until Skyfall, or no, not Skyfall, Spectre. It wasn't until Spectre that Ray Fiennes took over as M and Q Branch was brought into the picture after Desmond Llewellyn died, right? Okay, so like the different circumstances, very different circumstances. So I'm with you, that is pushing the goalpost to compare Superman to that, especially since we have a precedent of comic book characters like Batman and Spider-Man getting different themes with different incarnations and different universes being established in the multiverse. So I'm with you on that. And I'm also with you on, these are the same people that are telling us to let Man of Steel go, but you can't let Superman the movie go. You can't let Christopher Reeve go. That's a problem. That's why I say there's two cults. There's a Snyder cult and there's an anti-Snyder cult. They're both cults, right? They both exist, okay? Like, as much as we talk about the Snyder cult not being able to let go of the Snyderverse, and they want, Justice Leagues 1 and 2 and all that to happen, and they want everybody brought back and it refilmed, as delusional as that is, it's just like the people who are expecting James Gunn's Superman to be Superman the movie Redux. And like I said, I really feel like a lot of them are going to turn on him when that movie doesn't turn out to be that. And we're already seeing indications. Like, listen, that trailer, I gotta tell you, like, looking at that Superman trailer, if you think that what we're gonna see is just a rehash of Superman the movie, you're out to lunch. I don't know how you could possibly see that. Did you ever see Superman get beat up nearly as much in Christopher Reeve's films as we do here? No, not until, like, maybe Superman 3 and 4, and even then, it wasn't like he was getting tossed around. Did you have citizens helping him up out of rubble and whatnot? Like, was he ever sparring with Lois, like I mentioned earlier? No, that never happened, right? So I feel like a lot of these delusional humps from the anti-Snyder cult are gonna get their worlds crushed and their brains broken when they see that James Gunn has no interest in doing a redux of Superman the movie. And to me, it's all but clear that he doesn't, right? He wants to do something that respects Superman's legacy. So that's where, when it comes to the music thing, Amari, I can live with it as long as it is some type of differentiation, right? And it sounds like there's a differentiation. And you know what? It could even be a case where maybe they're using it for marketing purposes for this first film, and depending on how well it does, Superman does get a different DCU theme going forward. That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. If you want to touch on the legacy and the nostalgia using bits and pieces of a reworked Williams theme for this first film, but it eventually evolves into Corn Sweat Superman having his own film as he does more movies, hopefully as the DCU succeeds, fantastic. Hopefully that is the case. If that is indeed the path that they're going down with respect to how much we're hearing variations on the Williams theme. But I'm also just glad that it's a variation on the Williams theme. And again, not copying and pasting. But yeah, I'm with you on that, man. I'm 100% with you on all that. If they want us to move forward, if they want Snyder fans and the cultists and whatnot to move on, they need to move on themselves. That's why I say it's a tale of two cults. And fortunately, Amari, we don't belong to either one of them in that regard. We're part of the rational group that, all the rest of planet Earth is on when it comes to these characters. So I hear you, man. Thank you, as always, for the feedback. Greatly appreciate it. Good, sir. And dig in the email format. I do thank you for that. That is awesome. All right, let's get to another welcome return to the feedback circle here at Friday Flight, and that is Sam Freeman with a pair of emails this week. Sam's first email is a Thunderbolts review for this particular episode, and they say Thunderbolts is a great addition to the MCU. The whole cast did a great job. Florence Pugh as Yelena has been my favorite addition to the MCU post-Endgame, and here she continues to shine. I was interested to see Walker and Ghost back, but I didn't expect to like them as much as I did. Ghost's powers were always cool, but you see here she has a heart even if she tries to hide it. She can't help but saving people even when she acts like she doesn't care, and man, Walker was so good. You see the hero part and anti-hero more, but he still has flaws. He was so caught up in his failure and public perception that he didn't focus on what's important, his family, and now he has a chance to really grow into being the hero that he wants to be. And David Harbour's Red Guardian is just a joy to watch, they say. He's so funny, but he also has a deep love for Yelena that's very sweet. Bob was the wild card here, but he fit right in. He unexpectedly becomes a lead, despite seeming like he's just set up for a villain. Val is the real antagonist, and she was always fun in her small appearances, but here she has a chance to really flesh out the character, and boy is she selfish and slimy. She's like an annoying, less competent Amanda Waller, but maybe a bit more self-serving. Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, Sam, because, that's one of the things that has definitely come out in discussion about Thunderbolts. I remember when we watched Suicide Squad, one of the things that we tried to impart to a lot of people was that the true villain of that film was, in fact, Amanda Waller. It didn't follow the standard archetype of, the superpowered villain, that is trying to take over the world or do whatever, right, or annihilate everything, right? No, that was a film that introduced us to the idea of the master manipulator who claims to be on the side of good, who is really an antagonist and actually is ultimately the villain of the film, the villain of the piece. Amanda Waller is the villain of that first Suicide Squad film. And so you get to a film like this, Thunderbolts, and I was glad to see a lot of people realize online that Val is the villain of this film. Val most certainly is the villain of Thunderbolts, because think about it. The thing that one of the things I loved about Thunderbolts is not just that Val is, like the her motivations aside, like in terms of trying to avoid like, being impeached from her position, she is actively trying to kill the Thunderbolts, right? Like this team up is organically formed out of people that she is trying to murder, trying to annihilate, trying to incinerate. And to me, that felt like a very organic setup. It's like, well, she's trying to clean house. She's trying to get rid of all evidence that can implicate her, and that includes people. That includes individuals that worked for her at one point or another. She leads them all into a death trap in hopes that they will die, and then she tries to get Sentry to kill them. And it just, it doesn't work out. And then at the end, she spins it all into some slimy bullshit to keep her job and to keep it going. And it's like, yeah, that is a realization that I'm glad a lot of people that watch the movie are realizing that Valentina Allegra de Fontaine is actually the villain of the film. And I like your description, Sam. An annoying, less competent Amanda Waller, but maybe a bit more self-serving. Oh, very much so. Waller is not nearly as self-serving. Waller legitimately believes that what she's doing is for the good of God and country, right? She thinks that she is a believer in what she does with Task Force X. Valentina is trying to save herself. Valentina is going for all the glory, right? And she is definitely in Veep mode, right? And I'm not just, yes, I'm saying a lot of that because of Julia Louis-Dreyfus, but, not entirely. She's not playing it straight like Veep, but she's definitely bringing some Veep tendencies, if you will, into her portrayal of this character. And it does fit this universe. It absolutely does fit her ability to play it in that regard. But yeah, I think that's a great, great way of personifying exactly what type of a villain she is in this film. Sam says, story-wise, I was expecting this to be very similar to Suicide Squad. I knew nothing about the Thunderbolts, but the characters weren't recruited as a team. They were all individual agents that have become liabilities for Val, so she tries to wipe out their existence. I know they've all killed people and stuff, but that's dark to try and burn them all to hide your guilt. I love that they formed this team through that need to escape and shared interest, and of course lots of help from Alexei pushing them into a team. I like how Bucky got involved. I feel like he pulled out a lot of his Winter Soldier vibes for this one, but as a good person this time. I think the thing that's great about this film is that it's not a battle against bad guys, it's a battle against your own demons. All of these characters have mental health problems. Val views them as expendable, and they view themselves as probably worthless and lost. Yelena's line to Alexei at the end about having nothing to live for, just coming home and checking her phone, thinking about the bad things she's done. It's so relatable to a lot of us. It got me emotional. Bob just doesn't turn bad, it's this other side of himself that takes over. That can only see the darkness and is consumed by it. And when he tries to fight it at the end, it doesn't work. He's beating himself up, but that doesn't fix anything. It's the help and love of his friends that starts to heal him. That sense of shared community and love, it's really beautiful stuff that I didn't expect. Sam, I didn't expect it either, and like I said in my review, that's what got me. That's what hit me. I'd heard people talk about how powerful of a movie this was for mental health, but when I got to, and I went into the movie, I go into the movie, I'm open to crying. I'm not like closed off to that. As I get older, I realize, screw all this toxic masculinity bullshit and all these gender roles or whatever. If something gets you emotional, go ahead, experience it, let it out, don't hide it, don't shove that shit down. Screw all this whole men do not cry, men do not pout. Screw that. Okay, Boondock Saints was wrong as far as that's concerned. But either way, I went into it going like, okay, I don't think I'll get emotional over this, but we'll see. And then when that part happened, and that's the thing, Sam, is I knew how we knew how it was going to end, right? Like when Bob started punching the void, it's like, okay, we knew what that was. We knew how it was going to end. We knew what was going to happen. We knew that he couldn't keep punching it. We knew it was going to take the group, right? The inclusivity, them helping him, them being his friend. We knew that's what it was, and that's what got me. That's absolutely what got me. And like I said in my review, it wasn't like a loud, I didn't make any noise or anything. It's just the tears just streaming down my face when that happened, like through the glasses that I was wearing because I was watching it in 3D. I was just, and I just had to exhale, it was just, it was really, really poignant and extremely relatable. And like you said, really beautiful stuff that you didn't expect. I didn't expect it either. It was really, really touching, very touching, and just something you don't see from the superhero genre a whole lot, and you certainly don't see it a whole lot from the MCU. And the fact that they dedicated a whole film to it, that's why it's sixth in my MCU list. That's why I have it in my top tier of the MCU. It's so good, so incredibly poignant in that regard. Sam says the whole production was well done. There were specific choices with the camera, and the action was well choreographed. I love the top-down view fighting at the beginning, and I have to shout out the score by Sun Lux. Oh yes, Sun Lux did a phenomenal job with this score. I am with you on that, Sam. They say it kept me surprising with how good it was, which is always nice for an MCU film. Jake Schreier did a good job with this one, and it didn't just feel by committee. I think the new Avengers thing is cool and interesting. I wonder where that will go, especially with Cap forming his own Avengers. Unfortunately, Marvel spoiled that for me with the new poster, and the end credits tease for Fantastic Four got me hyped. I was confused why they listed the Fantastic Four theme in the credits at first. I'm really excited for that movie. July is going to be crazy, so Thunderbolts definitely ends up in the higher ranking of MCU films for me. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Sam. I saw it opening weekend, saw it opening day, so nothing was spoiled for me. I didn't even see. So many people have said that they saw the Fantastic Four theme listed in the credits. I didn't see it. I don't know how I missed it. I really am not certain how I missed it. Maybe I was wiping my eyes. Maybe that's why I didn't see it, but I did not catch it. So when that tease happened, like it hit me as a surprise, as a good surprise in that regard. So man, yeah, really good. Love your thoughts on Thunderbolts there, Sam. So let's get to your second email, which is just titled Star Wars is So Cool. Here we go. Andor talk. More Andor talk. Andor warning. Andor spoiler warning. All right, here we go. Sam says, so I actually caught up on a show in time and finished all of Andor. Not only that, but I managed to watch Rogue One again after. What an amazing experience. Andor is such a damn good show on so many levels: writing, acting, directing, production design, cinematography, score. And hey, our guy Michael Wilkinson on costumes. That's right, Michael Wilkinson, you're right. The DCEU's costume director. That's right. It's so detailed and crafted, Sam says. Diego Luna gets a standing ovation from me. With his performance and expanded story, Cassian Andor has become one of my favorite Star Wars characters. As the show was ending, I was getting sad that his story was coming to an end. But with the reveal that he has a child with Bix, I hope his kid continues on in his legacy. They would probably be around 30 by the time of the sequel trilogy, and it would be cool to see them be a part of something in the future. I'm with you there. That's completely diametrically opposed to Stu's beliefs earlier, that he hopes they don't do anything with it, but I'm with you. I'm fine either way. If they don't do anything, it doesn't bug me. But if they do something, Sam, I'm with you. That would be cool to see in that regard. But Sam says, I love Mon Mothma's amazing expansion. All the new characters were so good. You could deep dive into all of them. Luthen and Clea will always be iconic pieces of the rebellion. What makes Andor work so well is how tied into our reality it is. It is 100% set in Star Wars, but everything that happens reminds you of real life examples. This makes it emotionally engaging. I tell you what, the real life parallels I brought up a little bit earlier. It is so striking, and it is so crazy to think of all the real life parallels that are in this show. Oh, it's chilling, and it's really poignant, and it's really relatable, and it's just scary, and like, wow, Mon Mothma could be, standing in Congress making the same damn speech. She totally could, couldn't she? Couldn't she? Oh, my goodness. You know what? Yep. Social political stuff. This is where like science fiction and fantasy is at its best, when it is a mirror for the shit that's going on in real life, and when it like shows us like through a different lens exactly the type of bullshit that we're dealing with in reality, and how we need to be more like Mon Mothma and Cassian Andor and Luthen and Clea and others. We need to stand up for what we believe in, compared to those who just want to go with the flow and act like nothing is happening and keep their heads in the sand. Man. So Sam says, my favorite arcs were the Gorman ones. The people felt so real and lived in. I think Richard Samuel, who plays the main resistance leader on Gorman, was amazing. He's my favorite non-main character in the show. By the time we see the massacre, we are so invested in the people and culture that it's heartbreaking. Their singing was beautiful, and I loved how they reused some of that song in the score. Those 3 Gorman arcs are probably one of my favorite stories in all of Star Wars. Like I said in my review in that particular episode of Flight Box, Sam, when that episode ended, when the massacre episode ended, and the anthem was in the end credits, I listened to that whole thing. It was so hauntingly beautiful. Just Oh, so good. So incredibly good and powerful and emotionally engaging and just, man, gut-wrenching at times. Absolutely. That's the hallmark of great storytelling right there. Sam said, I knew when I finished the show I had to rewatch Rogue One. It's been forever since I've seen it, and the finale practically begs you to put it on next. Oh, literally, because Disney Plus will just say, hey, go ahead and watch this, click play. And like I said, I went, don't mind if I do, and completely rewatched Rogue One right after that. So I fully finished the Andor arc in one shot. I love that. But Sam says, the movie was already good to begin with, but now it's massively enhanced. It's funny, Rogue One is a prequel meant to flesh out and change your perspective on A New Hope, and then Rogue One gets its own prequel meant to flesh out and change your perspective on it. I don't remember having that many opinions on Cassian's character, but now with the show, I'm glued to the screen every time he's in a scene. The story matches so well, too. I know there's books on this, but I would love a Jyn Erso show to flesh out her journey more and Galen Erso's story. Of course, I'm a huge Mads Mikkelsen fan, so I'm probably just being greedy. He has a lot of presence in the film despite only having a few scenes. Gareth Edwards did such a good job with the scale of the film. It's like his greatest tool as a filmmaker, and it's on full display here. The Death Star was so big and intimidating, and the film was gorgeous. Yes, we also do have to give credit to Tony Gilroy for finishing the film and bringing it to the finish line, especially with some of the more nostalgic stuff that we saw towards the end of it that helps build the overall arc. And of course, his work on Rogue One, preceded what he just did with 2 seasons of Andor. So yeah, absolutely great props to him as well. And I hear you. I'd love maybe not 2 seasons for a Jyn Erso story, but let's get a limited series. How about that? Limited mini series. Doesn't even you know what? If you just have 3 longer episodes, you don't have to do 6, right? Have it be like Obi-Wan, right? And mind you, I'd take another season of Obi-Wan Kenobi because I really did like that show. But if Jyn got a show, like just a little bit to flesh out, what happened between the time that, she was hiding, from the moment that Galen was taken, to being rescued by Saw and raised by him and what her storyline was. I wouldn't mind that one bit. Would not mind that at all, to be honest with you. And I like Mads Mikkelsen as well, and really appreciated. That was I'd forgotten. I'd totally forgotten. It was one of those cases where so many great actors that are involved in this franchise. I'd forgotten that Mads was totally Galen Erso, and when he came up again in Rogue One, I was just like, oh yeah, that's right, freaking Lashif and Hannibal. That dude, he's a good guy here, and is man just as emotionally compelling and engaging. Yes, for sure, love it. Sam says, I feel like if you go into Rogue One expecting it to be exactly like Andor, you'll be a little disappointed. The tone is a little bit different. However, if you view it as a bridge between Andor and A New Hope, then it's perfect. It feels connected to both, which is so cool given how different those two stories feel. Rogue One was meant to be a more personal and grounded take on Star Wars, and Andor does the same with Rogue One. It all just complements each other so perfectly. This was a massive win for the Star Wars franchise. I absolutely want more Star Wars like Andor. But I also want other types of stories too. It's a big universe and we should explore more than one take. Personally, I think Ahsoka is my favorite take and tone on modern Star Wars. It's mythical and spiritual, funny and serious. It feels deeply connected to core Star Wars while also giving us something new and fresh. So I'm deeply excited for season 2 of that. But I also want more projects like Andor too. We can have both and multiple things in this amazing universe. I'm really hoping, no begging, Disney to pull an Andor Rogue One with the sequel trilogy. I really like those movies, and I would love to see them fleshed out with either additional movies or shows. Sam, in complete lockstep with you on all of that. I think your view on Andor is spot on. It is absolutely, or Rogue One rather, it is absolutely a bridge, right? Like you said, it's a bridge between Andor and A New Hope as far as the tone and pacing. I could not agree more. Like I said earlier, the pacing of Rogue One is no different than the pacing of any other Star Wars cinematic theatrical release that you've seen, right? It follows those beats. So that's going to be different than Andor. Andor and Star Wars television in general is more of a slow burn, does not have quite the same frenetic pace because it's longer form storytelling, right? You only have 2 hours and 16 minutes with Rogue One, 2.5 hours at most with a Star Wars film. So it's going to be quicker pace. It's going to be a bit more frenetic, if you will, in that regard, right? But Rogue One is a great bridge, a phenomenal bridge between Andor and A New Hope. I totally 100% agree, 1000% agree with your take on that. And I'm with you on how you feel about Ahsoka and having different projects and different tones. Like I do think we're getting that with Lucasfilm, and I think we're going to continue to get that. And I'm with you as far as, and I've seen more people say this, right? The idea of doing an Andor Rogue One with the sequel trilogy. Yes, right? Can we start to explore that time? I mean, I know that Ahsoka's there and the Mandalorian is there as far as the time after the original trilogy, but can we get closer to, the First Order and what happened with the sequel trilogy and all that, right? And I hopefully, if the Rey movie gets off the ground and some other stuff, involving the sequel trilogy gets off the ground, that they will eventually get us to a Star Wars television project on Disney Plus that does connect directly to the sequel trilogy and give us some more backstory on the sequel trilogy as well. Yes, I'm hoping for that. I am hopeful for that. And, fingers crossed. But could not agree with you more in your sentiments with on Andor and Star Wars in general, Sam. Glad that you enjoyed it. Greatly appreciate it as well. Thank you for returning to the feedback circle. Looking forward to more from you, indeed. So once again, this tells you how big of a week it was, guys. We have more people returning to the feedback circle after some extended breaks. Philip Barker joins us with another email, this one titled, Men Fall from the Sky and Gods Hurl Thunderbolts, which of course is part of Alfred's That's How It Starts quote to Bruce in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition, of course, yes. But the return of Phil Barker, here we go. He says, Hey Ray, hope all is well. Just wanted to say thanks for the shout out on the latest Flightcast episode. Really appreciate it. But also reinforces our friendship we've forged over the years. As you can guess by the title, there may or may not be some relevance. To be honest, I wish I could find more time to contribute to the Flight Chat show on a weekly basis, but my schedule gets insane. More often than not, I usually write these emails in between stuff at work, which was the best time for me, but lately, my workload has changed drastically and I haven't had a time to contribute. That said, I still listen to what everyone else has to say every week, and that's never not entertaining. Well, Phil, I talk about an extended break from the feedback circle, but listen, real life is real life. I totally understand that, and there is no pressure whatsoever. You are always welcome to the feedback circle whenever you get a chance to send emails, whenever is the optimal chance. So it's not a contest in terms of like who can contribute the most in a particular week. I am grateful for all of your emails and for any of you to still be listening to my show after all this time and still contribute to the feedback circle in any form. So thank you very much for that. It is always greatly appreciated, good sir. No doubt about that. So he says, first and foremost, I'll start with some Marvel-related topics, and beginning with Thunderbolts. He says, what an excellent display of Marvel Studios doing what they've done extremely well over the years. They've taken characters you may not know off the top of your head compared to popular Marvel heroes, and made a compelling story with them in it that culminates in a bond forged out of mutual trial and tribulation based on past transgressions. Some would call this trauma bonding, but I disagree, he says. These people came together and helped someone overcome their own darkness. I gotta say, I didn't expect Thunderbolts to crack my top 10, but it did. How long it stays there remains to be seen. I'm a huge Florence Pugh fan, and to see her take the leadership position in this movie while also identifying with her own struggles, I just love the character of Yelena Belova. The conversation she has with Red Guardian at the end of the movie pertaining to being alone nearly got me to shed a tear. Which I'll just say, I didn't shed any tears during this movie, but came close in a couple of instances. Understandable. He says, I don't have any issues with the film at all. If anything, the only thing that really stuck out to me was Taskmaster just getting taken off the board as fast as she was. It almost felt like Marvel Studios really didn't know what to do with the character following the events of Black Widow, and just decided to end her story here. Not really sure if I care that much, because while I like Taskmaster just fine in other mediums like Marvel vs. Capcom and other games, the only time I thought the character made any kind of larger impression in the comics was when he fought Deadpool in Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. Taskmaster is the last person Deadpool has to fight before the ending of the story happens, which I won't spoil here, but if you know, you know. It's actually quite genius how that book ends. I'll have to remember that. Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. I gotta figure out my Marvel Unlimited subscription and my DC Universe Infinite subscription, because there's some comics that I need to start reading again. But at any rate, continuing on, he says, like I mentioned earlier, I had next to zero issues with Thunderbolts. I love the T2 homage with Bucky and the motorcycle. I loved Yelena. I really loved the running gag of the taco shield with John Walker towards the end, and I also really like to see the return of Hannah John Kamen's ghost. This team has no business operating so well as a unit, and they do. That's the best part about all of this. They even have their own super weapon in the form of Bob Reynolds. Sentry is without question one of the most powerful characters introduced in the MCU, and he operates very similarly to how the Hulk did before Bruce merged the identities and became Smart Hulk. The only difference between the two is obviously The Void causes a lot more emotional stress and damage as opposed to the Hulk, who just goes on a massive destructive rampage. Regardless, the parallels between the Avengers and, spoiler, the new Avengers is uncanny. Speaking of uncanny, he says, Jake Schreier being in talks to helm X-Men for Marvel lit me up like Christmas. If Thunderbolts is any kind of indicator of what he's capable of in the Marvel sandbox, just give him the keys. Jake deserves it. I don't doubt that we won't see any new X-Men until after Secret Wars, but that's plenty of time for Jake Schreier to tinker and toy with whatever story he could tackle with the mutants of Marvel Comics. I don't care what the roster is, I don't care when the film comes out. If Jake Schreier takes the job, I'll be there day one. Let the era of the uncanny X-Men begin. The deep emotional ties of Thunderbolts and the found family aspect Schreier elevated in Thunderbolts would absolutely lend itself well enough to X-Men. I really do hope he takes the job. Yeah, you know what? I completely agree with you on that. And you know that, look, you know that that's what I'm waiting for, Phil. You know that that's, as far as Marvel projects, Marvel team-ups, Marvel characters, I am impatiently waiting for my uncanny X-Men to be brought to the forefront. And you're right, we're not going to see any of it until after Secret Wars. You're absolutely right. They're going to get this Avengers plan, this multiverse saga out of the way. And then, yeah, that whole report about Feige having 10 years worth of X-Men, oh, I die. I hope that is true. I seriously hope that is true. I cannot wait for that to happen. And yes, as I've said before, we're putting this out in the universe, the uncanny X-Men, the MCU's uncanny X-Men. We're speaking it into existence. That is what we're doing. But you're absolutely right. The found family dynamic and everything that Schreier just did with this Thunderbolts film absolutely lends itself incredibly well to whatever plans they have for the X-Men. No question about that. That would be a great dynamic. There's a lot of emotional centers and plot lines and whatnot. There's stuff from the comics that I know I need to read with respect to X-Men that I know that I probably will thoroughly enjoy. I'm just coming at this from a Fox X-Men standpoint. Fox X-Men plus, last year when I finally watched X-Men the Animated Series and X-Men 97 and, just further enhance my already new, appreciation for that grouping. Just, cannot wait. I know we're a couple years down the road from this. We got to get through Doomsday. We got to get through Secret Wars. We got to get through the rest of Phase 6 of the MCU and the Multiverse Saga. I know that. I understand that. It's fine. Just, the X-Men. But yeah, no, I hear you about Schreier taking that job. That would be a good idea, at least at this point in time so far, if Jake Schreier does indeed take the X-Men job. Segueing from that, Phil says, speaking of jobs in Hollywood, James Gunn has probably the hardest job in Hollywood, restarting the DC Universe and making a brand new Superman movie coupled with overseeing other projects that will be integral to this universe. There is a new trailer out. I have my own thoughts on it, he says. Some things I liked, a few things I didn't. We're on the same page as far as the score goes. I still think going back to that well isn't the best idea, even if I like the way Murphy's rendition sounds. But this Superman deserves his own unique score in the same way Henry Cavill and Christopher Reeve did. That's just my opinion, and I'm sure diehard fans of Superman would disagree. They seem to disagree on a lot of things when it comes to how this character gets represented anyway, so that should surprise absolutely nobody. Considering since the trailer dropped to no one's surprise, Jackals on Threads, of course, are weaponizing this film against Zack Snyder and that era of Superman. It was to be expected, but we know better now, don't we? Yes, we do, Lex. The time for engaging that nonsense is a thing of the past. Mute, block, move on. Maybe leave a snarky comment before doing so, but the hate, bait, bad faith engagement is a thing of yesteryear. I keep telling myself when I see BS like that, nope, we're not doing this, not again. I even see people comparing the Ironheart trailer to the Superman trailer and vice versa. Like, come on. Navigating the nonsense has become almost pivotal to doing things in the podcasting streaming video space, and I just continue to shake my head when I see garbage thumbnails or clickbait video titles. It truly amazes me at the effect that crap actually has on people. Then again, I look at the current White House administration and am reminded that the level of idiocracy isn't as astonishing as it was 20 years ago. Regardless, I just try to enjoy these things in stride. I wish more people would too. And with that in mind, Phil, I know that you and I are 1,000% in lockstep with respect to our thoughts on the current administration, or regime, as might be better put, to be honest with you. But there are similarities, for people that don't want to get political. It's like, unfortunately for you, and not you, Phil, but unfortunately for people that don't want things to get political with respect to movies, TV, and other assorted media, the connections are all there. And when it comes to the audience and the general populace, the mindsets are very similar, extremely similar. The idea that hate, unfortunately, is easier. It's more of an easy button for people to press, right? Like, I've said this for years with respect to all the slander and all the toxicity and all the negative clickbait that we've seen on YouTube and on Twitter and social media and everywhere else, right? Like, it's much easier to just hit that easy button and hate things, right? It's much easier to do that. It's much easier to express animosity. You get more attention and more eyeballs when, people are bringing something down, right? It's way easier to get millions of followers when you hate something than it is when you actually like something, because people don't trust liking things. People, they don't want to do the work to actually heal as a person. They just want to consistently, fall in line with whatever hate rhetoric makes them feel better about themselves, right? It's all about a superiority complex that people have these days, and that's true with fans of our franchises. It's true with people in this country that voted a particular way or another back in November. It's the same thing, and it's a lot of the same. You see a lot of the same shit, right? I saw a video earlier today that I shared on Threads. Somebody calling out the bullshit from Nerdrotic and Critical Drinker and Star Wars Theory with respect to them trashing the Ironheart trailer, and all those idiots talking about the MCU and making stupid ass comparisons between that and Superman. I said this from the beginning, and I had a couple of idiots, try and come at me, and they were immediately soundly blocked because I don't play that shit. And I guarantee that none of these idiots would say any of the shit to me in person that they, have the courage to say in their mom's basement in front of their computer. No, step out front, step outside, cowards, and let's see how brave your jaw is, then, with respect to, retribution right on your flipping doorstep. But a lot of the hateful rhetoric and behavior that these idiots perpetuate towards these projects, it's the same shit that we see in real life, with respect to politics and with respect to stuff going on in reality, right? The people that, in the current regime and whatnot, and people who support the current regime that are fearful of women and minorities, it's the same fear of women and minorities that idiots like Nerdrotic and Critical Drinker and Star Wars Theory have, right? That's why the Acolytes scared the shit out of them, because it was all women. It was largely women and brown people, and they can't take that. It's not. It rocks their world. They're terrified of that, right? It's the same thing with Ironheart. The idea of a show like Ironheart existing in their precious MCU terrifies them. They want to go back to white guys named Chris as the lead all the time, every time. They don't want women. They want women in their place. The furthest a woman should be able to go in the MCU is Pepper Potts. That's all they want. That's the world that they want. They want nothing but damsels in distress that need to be rescued by the tall, strapping white men, right? White men are always the hero. White men are always the protagonist. That's what they want. It's the same shit that we see in real life. So for all the people that want to disconnect, movies, TV, and other assorted media from the real world, sorry, it's the same shit. It's the exact same mindset, the exact same kind of people. That's why I call them Nerd MAGA, because that's what they are. They're espousing the same principles and the same ideas of MAGA in nerd form. It's the same shit. It's just, movies, TV, and fakery. Right? But the same outrage that they have over Bruce Springsteen is the same outrage that they have over Ironheart. There's no separation there. And yeah, like you said, mute, block, move on. We're not doing that shit this time. They're not going to harsh our calm. It's all about protecting your peace here in 2025 going forward. And that's what we're going to do, no doubt about it. And Phil says, anyway, I don't think this Digital Raven is Dorsey level lengths, but I hope it gives you something entertaining to read for the flight chat. Only a few more weeks until I get my Nintendo Switch 2, and I am counting down the days for that. I just might do an unboxing video for that for my channel, just for funsies. Anyway, live long and prosper. Take care. Philip Barker. He says, P.S. Andor isn't my bag, but I'm glad Star Wars fans are enjoying the hell out of it. Yes, Phil did not take part in our Andor chat because, no, Andor is not his bag, but that is perfectly fine. It's all subjective. We have more than enough talk about that with everybody else. It's all good, good sir. And when that Switch comes out, if people, in case he does do an unboxing video, because I think he has a Twitch account. I think Phil does have a Twitch account, and I'm pretty sure it's the same as this YouTube unfiltered. But yeah, we'll definitely we want a breakdown and a report of that because, like I've said before, I don't talk enough video games. I miss video games. I need to get back into video games. I have not pre-ordered a Switch 2. I've not gone down that rabbit hole yet because you want to talk about catch up that I need to do on video game franchises? I still haven't played Grand Theft Auto 5. Did you hear what I said? I still haven't played Grand Theft Auto 5. Right? The one that everybody's sick of because it's been around for over 10 years. And it's like, when are we going to get a new Grand Theft Auto? I still haven't played it yet. And I used to be a religious Grand Theft Auto fan. I played 3. I played Vice City. I played San Andreas. I played Grand Theft Auto 4. I loved that series. And I haven't played the most recent one since it's released. Whenever that release date was, it's long ago now. But I still need to play that, let alone all the Assassin's Creeds that I'm behind on, and just, yeah, I know I don't need to play all of them, but I'm a completionist. It's just how my brain works. I'm even behind on Mario games. Mario's my favorite franchise, the favorite video game character in the world. I haven't played Odyssey. There's Mario games I haven't flipping played. And it's kind of a little unfair. Well, no, it's the same problem I had with TV shows because what have I played? When I got my Red and Blue Mario Switch, what did I get? I got Super Mario All-Stars so that I could replay Super Mario 64, so that I could replay Super Mario Sunshine and rebeat Super Mario Galaxy because I love all 3 of those games. So, yeah, video game talk. Phil, when you unbox that Nintendo Switch 2, I would like a report. Please, if you can just find a way to send some feedback in whenever you can. No pressure, man, but I would love to hear how the Switch 2 is going for you for sure. Video game chat. I miss video games. I miss video games so much. I gotta find time, man. I don't know when I'm gonna have time, but I'm gonna try. I don't know, but thank you as always for your feedback, good sir. You are always welcome here. It is greatly appreciated. I'm glad we're in lockstep on Thunderbolts. I honestly wasn't sure how you felt about it, but I'm glad you enjoyed it as much as I did. Because what a breath of fresh air for the MCU. How about that? Love it, man. All right, we are almost at the finish line for this episode. Let's get to Alex De Silva for his Friday flight number 3 email. He says, "Hey Ray, some miscellaneous thoughts before getting into spoiler thoughts on Andor and Star Trek. Have you seen the Jason Tatum Superman commercial? It's pretty cool that DC is partnering with the NBA in such a direct way, although the trailer is now very unfortunately ironic since JT suffered an Achilles tear in Game 4 versus the Knicks and is out for the rest of the postseason and much of next season. That was devastating to watch, although I'm so happy with the way the rest of the team came out and performed against the Knicks in Game 5. I want to shut these bums out of the playoffs so badly. The Knicks are such an annoying team." It's important to note that Alex sent this email before the Knicks eliminated the Celtics from the playoffs in Game 6. So, yeah. Unfortunately, we both fell to the Knicks in the playoffs. In 6 games, no less. They beat us in 6. They beat you in 6. So, yeah, I'm no Knicks fan. I'm not rooting for them by any stretch of the imagination. But I tell you what, thank you for bringing up the Jason Tatum commercial. Because I did see it, and you know what? It's one of those things, Alex, where I talked about this during the DCU era. Like I said that, with respect to PR and marketing, I felt that there were a lot of areas that the DCEU was lacking, that DC Films was lacking in, and this was one of them. I didn't feel like there was enough tie-in marketing with other leagues and whatnot. But I'd see that with Marvel, right? You'd see it, and I talked about in the past about how, like, because Disney owns ESPN and ABC, that, their news product, Good Morning America and ABC World News, and also all their sports programming was an easy outlet for Marvel marketing and cross-promotion, and somehow DC needed to do the same thing. So to me, even though this Jason Tatum ad got pulled because of his Achilles tear, and it sucks, it's bad timing, it's unfortunate, but the ad itself, like, that type of stuff, yes, absolutely, this is 1000% what DC Studios needs to be doing. That type of promotion, and for people who haven't seen it, for people who are not sports fans, Jason Tatum plays for the Boston Celtics, NBA. He did tear his Achilles in the playoffs. Most recently, they got knocked out by the New York Knicks. Whatever. Point is, they made an ad where it is pointing to Superman's release on July 11th, and it's this whole thing about how with Superman down, who's going to take his place? And the whole idea is that Jason Tatum is going to take over Superman. It's all these reporters, and you see the headlines, you see clips from the movie, right? You see Jason Tatum do the shirt rip reveal where he's got the new Superman logo underneath his uniform, right? And like, Superman in theaters July 11th. Yes, Yes, absolutely. This is the type of marketing that DC Studios 1000% needs to be engaging in. More of that. More of this. You've got to hit the general audience where they live, and that means in their sports, that means in their news. It's got to be all over, right? They need to see more of this, yes. Partnering with the NBA like this, great. Do some more stuff like this. Find out who's in the finals, right? Like whoever gets it, we're approaching conference finals, right? Like find another way to get into the NBA playoffs with some cross promotional Superman marketing. Absolutely. Yes. This is exactly it. James Gunn and the DC Studios marketing team, they were doing the right thing. They're doing what they need to be doing. And even further in the PR realm, James Gunn, he's doing some more of his social media PR. I've been getting the notifications on threads. He's been talking to people, confirming and denying certain things with respect to the DCU and the projects going on in DC Studios and all that. Says they're close to a Wonder Woman, but won't reveal anything, right? Like that's, yeah. This is what they need to be doing. All the stuff that DC Films didn't do, DC Studios is so far doing. And time will tell if it works, but this is what you need to be doing. Absolutely. This type of marketing, that type of marketing like that Jason Tatum commercial is exactly what they need to be doing. More of that, please. Yes, 1000%. Thank you for bringing that up. Anyway, he says, on to the purely geeky stuff. That Superman trailer was amazing. It gave me chills, he says, and it displayed how much heart this movie seems like it's going to have. This trailer did a great job in building the hype because now I'm even more excited for this movie. Not to speak too prematurely, but Gunn has the opportunity to do something epic and give us the best Superman movie ever made. Time will tell. I'm rooting for him. I want to make that abundantly clear, and I've said that from the beginning. I am rooting for James Gunn to massively succeed with this film. I don't want this film to fail. I want this film to succeed. I want it to be. I want to be able. And it's weird because I'm the same kind of person that pushes back when people are like, "Oh, well, I wanted to like this movie. I wanted to like Man of Steel." It's like, well, if you wanted to like it, then you would like it, right? Now, here's the thing. I'm gonna like Superman. I know I am. I'm gonna like the Superman movie. I know I am. I'm going to like it. The question is, how much am I going to like it? Do I want to be able to say that it is better than Man of Steel? I'd love to. I would love to be in a position where I feel like I can make the choice to say that I think it's better than Man of Steel. I don't need to say that. I'm fine with it being what it is, and if I still prefer Man of Steel, that doesn't mean that I won't give Superman its flowers if I enjoy it as much as I think I will, right? As much as I'm hoping to, right? I want to be happy. I like being happy. So, of course, I am rooting for this film to be exactly what Alex said. I want it to be maybe the best Superman movie ever made. Of course I do. Why would I root against that? It does not harm Zack Snyder. It does not harm Henry Cavill. It does not harm the DCEU or anything that I enjoyed in that franchise or Zack Snyder's trilogy. It does not harm any of that. If James Gunn's Superman is subjectively the best Superman movie ever made, or if people call it that, and it leads to the DCU being this incredibly successful dynasty, akin to what we've had for the last 17 years in the MCU. No, I am rooting for that. I am 100% rooting for that. Why? Because I am a Superman fan. I am. Batman is my number one superhero, but I'm still a Superman fan, and I am a DC fan. I root for the success of Superman, Batman, and DC characters in these mediums. So absolutely, we don't want to speak prematurely, and it is cautious optimism, but my cautious optimism has risen, and the trailer looked good. Listen, the trailer looked good. It did. So here's hoping. Fingers crossed for sure. Alex says there's a banner on the Max app where they're boasting about how Max is being rebranded to HBO Max, and they're acting like this is such a brilliant idea. Like, yeah, duh, HBO is the name that sells, not Max. If only millions of people had been telling Warner Brothers that since the initial Max rebrand. Yes, I know. In the latest episode of David Zaslav is a complete idiot. Any one of us could have told him. We did tell him. We did say what the branding was, but it was his hubris and his ego that allowed him to think, oh, I could just take HBO out and rebrand it myself. No, dipshit. You absolutely needed to keep HBO in that branding, and now you're putting it back to try and bring back the masses. And you know what? It may work. Like, it probably will work overall, because then people who thought HBO Max was gone will be like, oh, HBO Max is back. I guarantee the general audience that was watching HBO Max before is like, oh, HBO Max is back. They'll think that HBO Max is coming back. And the rest of us that pay attention to all this and knew that the rebranding was dumb in the first place are going to look at it and going, oh, wow, really? Okay. But it's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things as long as it brings the people back, right? So, anyway, yeah. He says, did you see the Wall Street Journal report where Kevin Feige allegedly said watching the MCU feels more like homework than entertainment. It's good that there seems to be self-awareness on Marvel's part that they definitely oversaturated the market. From my perspective, not everything needs to be a TV show. Shows should be saved for really special ideas and properties that benefit from the longer and slower format, while everything else primarily sticks to movies. I'd actually reverse that, to be honest with you, Alex. I think that movies should be saved for really special ideas and properties that benefit from the event film format, while everything else primarily sticks to shows. That's what I think should be the case, right? That's what I think is the balance. And the reason I say that is because you don't have as much real estate with a movie, so you've got to make a bang, and that needs to be a special idea and property. I see where you're coming from in terms of ideas that you don't think would benefit from, that don't need to be on the big screen, but I'm not looking at the hierarchy like that, right? You're talking about benefiting from the longer and slower format. Well, the special ideas and properties, like, is a longer format, like you're talking about from a marketing standpoint, in terms of like, oh, it'll be stronger marketing because it's a TV show and there's not a whole lot behind it and you can grow something like that. Well, I suppose, but Marvel has made as we talked about before, Phil brought up just before you, Marvel is really good at taking characters we've never heard of or barely know anything about and like turning it into gold on the big screen, with respect to Guardians of the Galaxy, with respect to Ant-Man, with respect to, and now Thunderbolts in this regard, right? So to me, I feel like they're fine with respect to that. They just need to scale back how many they do a year. And I know that they're doing 3 movies this year, right? And they've got Daredevil, they've got Ironheart coming out, so that's 3 movies and at least 2 shows. I realize it seems like it's business as usual, but Captain America Brave New World, not that great. Thunderbolts. We'll see how that goes. Obviously Daredevil Born Again did really well for them. Hopefully Ironheart gets some good viewership, especially from Ryan Coogler fans and fans of the Riri Williams character. And we'll see how Fantastic Four First Steps does, because there's a lot of pressure on that as well, for sure. But yeah, the Wall Street Journal report, that was the one that I did talk about. It's behind a paywall, and I had to, when I covered it on Flightcast a couple of weeks ago, I had to go with the breakdown of that article from a non-paywalled site, because these publications are paywalling everything now, and so now I had to rely on another individual to give me a breakdown of what the paywalled stuff said, because I'm not paying Wall Street Journal for that. So, it's unfortunate that news has to be paywalled, and it just further leads to the degradation of literacy and media literacy and us being knowledgeable as a people, but that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, Alex says, sticking with Marvel, do you think there's a non-zero chance of Avengers Doomsday being not profitable? Or will the Avengers brand still carry weight with audiences, even though those audiences have started becoming extremely more selective with what MCU movies they watch? I think, honestly, it still carries weight with audiences. And the reason I say that is because I know that Marvel is going to put all their marketing effort into it, and the audience is going to remember Avengers. And one thing that we have most certainly seen post 2020 is that team ups still do the best for them, right? We know how well No Way Home did. We know how well Deadpool and Wolverine did, right? Team ups are still, because that's what the audience decides to spend their money on. They skip the other films. I mean, that literally happened, right? Where in 2021, whether their theaters were completely at capacity or not a year after the pandemic started, they decided en large, en masse, that they weren't going to check out Black Widow that much. They weren't going to check out Shang-Chi that much, unfortunately. They weren't going to check out Eternals that much, but they all showed up in December for Spider-Man No Way Home. They did. And we saw it again a couple years ago. There was only one Marvel movie, and they all showed up for it because it was Deadpool and Wolverine. So team-ups still sell well. And all that hype, all that marketing, all those people, all those characters involved, Doomsday is going to sell. It is. Doomsday is going to be profitable. I most certainly think it will. If there's any other MCU movies or whatnot that come out that year, they will skip those and just go to Doomsday. That's what's going to happen, as far as I'm concerned in that regard. Alex says, before getting into the Andor finale, apparently the original idea for episode 9 was for it to be a horror episode where Cassian and crew are transporting a bunch of KX droids from Gorman to Yavin, and the droids get loose. This would have been sick, as it would have given us the first time on screen that Star Wars really ventures into the horror realm. It's sad that it didn't work out. Well, okay, it's sad that it didn't work out as an episode, but are we really going to decry what episode 9 ended up being? The Mon Mothma speech? No, that was still awesome. That was still amazing. That was still great. That was still part of the best arc in the whole show, as far as I'm concerned, subjectively speaking. So while I would have loved to have seen the horror episode, I'm fine with the minutes of horror that we got from the K2 droids and the Gorman Massacre. That worked out for me. So I guess I'm not that sad with respect to it. And there's still other opportunities for Star Wars to do droid horror. And I think that's how you do horror in Star Wars, is you make it droids. It seems like a no-brainer now that I think about it. Machines, evil machines, raging a rampage. And especially now you can do it with K2 droids. Like, that absolutely would work based on how they horrified us in the Gorman Massacre episode. So I'm all for that still happening. So I think the door is still open for that. We'll see. Not in Andor, obviously, but somewhere else along the line in another Star Wars series. Alex says the Andor finale was great. We got a sense of just how close Clea and Luthen are. Oh, spoilers. That's right. Spoilers. Pardon me. Spoilers. Andor spoilers. Warning. Spoilers. All right. Here we go. I'm not overly surprised that he died, he says, but Clea being left alive leaves room for her to appear in other Star Wars projects down the line. Yes, it does. And again, Elizabeth DeLau, this was her first role. Hopefully it continues, because we all loved her as Clea, and hopefully she experiences a long and vibrant career as a result of this exposure. Here's hoping, fingers crossed, thumbs up for her. It says these last few episodes had a much more direct Star Wars vibe, thanks in large part to K2. His banter with Cassian definitely felt like the type of thing you'd get in the movies. Oh yeah, it had to lead up into Rogue One's pacing for sure. The final sequence of Cassian walking to the ship with the music swelling and him exchanging glances with the Force-sensitive lady gave me chills. Little does he know he's walking toward his destiny. He might have known it, personally, especially when he saw her. Part of me wonders if that was foreshadowing and he kind of knew where this was all headed, especially once he found out. Like knowing about the Death Star plans at that point, like, it's like, okay, this is it. This is what my moment is. This is what I'm going to do. This is going to be my shining moment, if you will, for the rebellion. I wonder if he kind of clandestinely knew that, to be honest with you. And then we get the final scene of Big Spec on Mina Rao, he says. I'm glad that B2 got to reunite with at least one person from his original gang. When I initially saw Biggs holding the baby, I thought, oh dang, she started a new life with someone else. But then I realized, wait a minute, it's been a year since she left. That's Cassian's baby. I wonder if we'll see that baby all grown up one day in a different project. Well, Stu's not hoping for that, but I think the rest of us kind of are, if you will. But he says, as I was watching the arc, I got the sense that the pacing felt weird. The arc sure didn't feel like a series finale, but then it became clear that Rogue One is the true finale to Andor. I really want to give the movie another watch now with all the additional context that the show provided. Can you imagine if Rogue One hadn't come out yet and was set to be released only after the conclusion of Andor? The hype for that movie would be off the charts. I agree. It's weird, though, because it's almost like the chicken and the egg. It's like, okay, the hype for Andor also came out of the fact that we knew it was coming from a character in Rogue One, so we were intrigued by it. But would Andor have done well enough on its own without knowing that it was connected to Rogue One that, it would have turned Rogue One into potentially like a $2 billion film as opposed to $1 billion? I don't know. That's a good question. I tend to agree that, yes, the hype for Rogue One would have been higher in that regard, more than just what it already was at that point in time. But yeah, it would have been intriguing for that, for sure. But yes, I absolutely recommend, if anybody out there, if you're listening to this, then you've heard all of our Andor spoilers, but I absolutely recommend watching Rogue One right after finishing Andor. It's a great companion piece. Clearly, a number of us have already done that. That's what I think you should have done, Alex, is you just go right into Rogue One if you have the time. So if you haven't done it already yet, Alex, go ahead and rewatch Rogue One. Now with the Andor context, 2 seasons worth in your head. He says, when an episode ends, I always let the credits roll to listen to the music and just reflect. Imagine my surprise and delight when the credits music in the final episode shifted to the original Star Wars theme. That was so fitting, and it shows that despite Tony Gilroy and his team not necessarily being massive Star Wars fans, they still have clear respect for the franchise. Great stuff. Oh, I think their clear respect for the franchise is all the way through that show. I mean, the connective tissue and just further expanding the universe in that particular sector of it, that particular time frame in between episodes 3 and 4. I've never believed that they did not have massive respect for this franchise from Rogue One all the way through this show. Just incredible job, well done, and just such a great piece, a great addition to the Star Wars franchise as a whole. All right, on to TNG watching. He watched A Matter of Perspective this week. He says, this episode reminded me of the one when Data was on trial. The holodeck recreations felt like a very flawed way of producing evidence. It's all just hearsay. Manua and Taina's testimonies don't even line up. They contradict each other. A person using this form of testimony could just manipulate events to appear like they want them to. Well, that was kind of the issue, or that was kind of the point, though, was to like do a whole Rashomon. That was the idea, was they were trying to show how different events were being distorted based on perspectives, and based on what anybody was thinking or saying, especially between Manua, Taina, and Riker, right, in terms of what they thought was happening in their perception. So you're right. That form of testimony, it's really no different. I mean, you're seeing it play out, but it's still just a case of he said, she said, or they said, or whatever, right? He says the evidence provided by Data and Geordi at the end was much stronger and more conclusive, which was satisfying. Yeah, especially when they realized that, the holodeck recreation, and ultimately the holodeck recreation turned into a plot device, because if it wasn't for the fact that they recreated his device, Dr. Apgar's device in the holodeck, that it never would have amplified the Krieger waves being sent from the planet and fired them around the ship. The subplots, like, what is going on? What's all these waves damaging the ship? And it was literally that, like the realization that, like, oh, Dr. Apgar actually finished the damn thing, and we just happened to recreate it for this testimony after his death, and it kind of shoots holes in his story, right? In that regard. So that's where the holodeck really became a plot device for the end, the satisfying end of that, the satisfying conclusion of that episode, which I do agree with you on that part. He says next episode is called Yesterday's Enterprise, Live Long and Prosper, Alex. Yesterday's Enterprise, yes. Voted in 1994 as number 3 in the Star Trek Next Generation Viewers' Choice Marathon, the third most popular episode at that time of Star Trek TNG. Very curious to hear your thoughts on that one, Alex. Hope that you enjoy it. Thank you, as always, for the feedback, and you live long and prosper as well, good sir. And finally, we'll close out this extended feedback session with an email from Jared Cardos titled Looking Up and Making Something Iconic. Oh, yes, there we go. We know what he's talking about here. Hey, Ray, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to drop some thoughts on the 2 big trailers that dropped this week, he says. But first, a couple of things that kind of slid under the cracks. First, earlier in the week, there was a first look at Spider Noir, an Amazon TV series based on the Spider-Man Noir comics with Nicolas Cage starring as the titular character. He says we don't get a lot of footage, but what we get looks pretty cool, and they announced that they're going to present both color and black and white versions of the show, which is cool. I hope we get some more footage soon, if only just because right now the most popular video when I looked this up was a deep fake that mixes up footage from this trailer AI and clips from other movies. Yeah, the deep fake stuff and the AI shit that's really a massive problem at this point. But, because the show doesn't come out till next year, I feel like it's definitely on the back burner compared to what we're, anticipating this year, Jared. But you're right. I did see that clip even before you sent it, and I did see the announcement, and it's still intriguing to me, Nick Cage playing that role. But yeah, definitely Spider Noir on Amazon in 2026. So Amazon dabbling in both Marvel and DC, right? Remember, they got Batman Cape Crusader. And Jared says, and there was a first look at Season 2 of Fallout, as well as a December release date and confirmation that a Season 3 has already been greenlit. Really enjoyed the first season of Fallout and really excited to see where they take it next. Yeah, the first season of Fallout is still on my list. I still have not watched it. I know, I need to watch it. I need to get into it and see how I feel about it, but I'll probably enjoy it. That's the thing. I'll probably watch it and I'll enjoy it, and then, now that becomes another show that's on my list to keep up with in that regard. But man, Amazon, my goodness, my Amazon catch up. I still got to get caught up on The Boys. I still got to watch Marvelous Miss Maisel and so many other things as well, just on Amazon alone. Invincible. I'm backlogged on Invincible. I've only seen the first season. Anyway, moving forward. Jared says, now on to the main events. Before I get into my thoughts on the big Superman trailer, I wanted to talk about the trailer for Ironheart, which came out on the same day, which I don't think was the best choice, he says, but at least they're actually doing some marketing for it, I guess. Anyway, I liked what I saw, he says. The first scene we see with Riri being caught in a death trap, and instead of following instructions, she breaks out of the trap, instead tells you so much about the character without having to say it. I feel like between the bulkier, more practical suit and the more grounded story, this feels like something that could have been in one of the earlier Iron Man movies, but also doing its own thing, if that makes sense. This went from a show that I was not really invested in when it was announced to something I'm definitely curious to give a watch. Yes, absolutely, completely agree with that. And yeah, I'm with you. The Marvel's whole marketing decision around Ironheart is head scratching, to wait until now to give us a first trailer. And then not only that, you wait until the day that, right after James Gunn says, hey, we're dropping a new Superman trailer, you decide, oh, okay, let's throw in this Ironheart trailer. And you do it like a half hour or so before the Superman trailer releases, or I think it was like maybe an hour or two, whatever it was. But still, it's weird, and there's been a lot of speculation with respect to why Disney's been dragging their feet on it, and unfortunately, some of it definitely is social political, and it's hard to argue that it's not a good look. It's really not a good look for Marvel Studios, and with respect to releasing that marketing. But the trailer does look good, and it's definitely a show that a number of us are going to now pay attention to for sure. Jared says, finally for the Superman trailer, really great. Like you, I think the best part was the scene/argument between Lois and Clark's Superman, but about whatever action he did in that war-torn country. Both for that amazing Reeve-like switch from Clark to Superman with just a posture change, octave voice change, and for that argument that sells both Clark's intense need to help and Lois asking the hard questions, even to those she cares for. And yeah, it definitely invokes some Snyder comparisons, but this feels more grounded than in BVS, which kind of towed the line between grounded and operatic. Outside of that, the action looks great. There's a great Lex line that just feels so true to that character. Is that the line where he has Superman is not a man, he's an it? Is it that one? Yeah, I agree with that. That is very much true to his character. He says some more looks at some of the other new superheroes that are a part of this. What's cool about this trailer is that while it does show a lot more of what to expect with this film, it still doesn't show the whole story and leaves some mystery. Overall, a fantastic trailer, well worth the wait. Yeah, no, it seriously, and it's funny you say that, Jared, about how this trailer makes it seem like this movie is going to be more grounded. I actually agree with that, but I'm glad that you used the word operatic, because that's a great way to put the Snyder trilogy, right? It is operatic, right? Or toes that line you said between grounded and operatic. And this one just seems grounded, right? The idea that they're arguing in an apartment, or all the times that Superman is getting battered and thrown around, and how dirty his uniform gets, and how, he's got bystanders helping him up to his feet and that type of thing. No, this definitely does feel like it will be more grounded. And I think a lot of people are noting the heart that seems to already be present in this film, even just looking at this trailer, right? And we know that James Gunn does heart very well. He did it well in the Guardians trilogy. He did it well in the Suicide Squad. And so I think that will serve this film very well. And there's a lot to be optimistic and excited for with respect to this trailer. Absolutely agree with that. He says, since you mentioned it, I'll go ahead and say that no, Rick Flag Sr. doesn't end up as Secretary of State, at least not in Creature Commandos. I think that him and Luthor being shown during those scenes were to show figures of authority that are against Superman's actions in general, but it has caused people to wonder if maybe this is a hint at Luthor running for president either in this movie or the next, which would be really interesting to see. To do a President-Lex story in these times would be really ballsy. Yeah, but Gunn would do it. Gunn is definitely one of those that would do it, because based on his previous political postings and maybe even some stuff that he said these days, we know that he is not he is not in favor of the current regime. We know that for a fact. But Jared says, I think that'll do it for me on this one. Looking forward to your future episodes. Yes, thank you, Jared, for the feedback as always. Yeah, our cautious optimism, at least mine, has definitely gone up for the Superman film. I think one of the things Gunn posted the other day might have confirmed that it is not President Lex, at least not for certain in this film, but whether or not they do that for the future, who knows? I mean, we got Mayor Kingpin over on Daredevil Born Again. Why not President Lex at some point in the DCU? Hey, we'll see. But you said it would be ballsy. Yeah, you're right. But I think James Gunn would be ballsy enough to do it. I really do. Especially if this first one does as well as we're all hoping it does. So thank you, as always, for the feedback, Jared. It is indeed greatly appreciated. And there you have it. That'll do it for our longer extended episode of Friday Flight on a Saturday. Had a lot to cover and a lot to talk about this week, because a lot did happen. Thank you to everyone for listening to this show. Thank you to everyone that sent in feedback this week. John R., Rachel Bernadowitz, Wally U, Omari, Amr, Stu, Sam, Alex, Phil, Jared, all of you, everybody. Thank you so much for this extra long episode. We had a lot to cover. We had a lot to talk about, and we got through it. It was a day late because of extenuating circumstances, but we got it done. We got it out there, and we were refreshed for another week of movies, TV, and other sort of media to discuss. If you liked what you heard, or you have thoughts on anything that we talked about in this particular episode, whatever it was, Andor, Thunderbolts, Superman, Ironheart, we talked about a whole lot of stuff this week. If you have any thoughts and you want to join the feedback circle, you know where to find me on Threads and Instagram at the FLITEcast, on Blue Sky at FLITEcast. You can comment on the FLITEcast YouTube page under the posting for this episode. There's also the FLITEcast Facebook page, and of course, I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care. Stay safe out there. Have a great rest of the weekend, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.